The kitchen is warm in a way that only a kitchen at the end of a day can be. The supper dishes are stacked beside the sink, not yet washed, but rinsed and waiting. A pot of coffee sits on the back of the gas range, the percolator unplugged now, the last cup of the evening already poured. The smell in the air is layered. Roast beef from earlier, still faint. The yeasty sweetness of bread that was baked that morning. The lemon oil someone rubbed into the wooden countertop after lunch. And underneath all of it, the particular smell of a house that has been lived in all day. Wool from the rug in the front room, the soap by the kitchen sink, the faint mineral smell of the linoleum floor when it has been recently mopped. It is somewhere just past 7 in the evening. The sun has dropped behind the houses across the street, and the kitchen is lit now by a single overhead bulb in a milk glass fixture, the kind that softens everything it touches. A woman moves through this room. She is not hurrying. She is doing something with a dish towel folded over her shoulder, the way a person does when they have moved through the same kitchen 10,000 times, and the rhythm has become invisible to them. The radio in the front room is playing softly. Someone is laughing on the program. The husband is sitting in the armchair, his shoes off, his newspaper folded in his lap. The children are upstairs, 2 of them, one in a bathtub, one waiting their turn, their voices drifting down through the heating grates. This is the last hour, the hour before bed in a 1950s American home, and I want to sit inside it with you tonight, because something is about to happen to this hour that no one in this kitchen yet knows, something that will change it so completely that within 10 years, the rhythm we're about to walk through together will have been quietly and almost entirely replaced. The television set is coming. It is already in some of the houses on this block. By 1955, it will be in 2/3 of American homes. By 1960, it will be in nearly 9 out of 10. And this hour, this particular hour, the last hour before bed in a household that has not yet been rearranged around a screen, will become one of the things we did not realize we were losing until it was already gone. If you enjoy listening to sleep stories like this, subscribe. I post stories like this weekly. So let us stay here for a while. Let us walk through this house, room by room, and let me show you what the last hour looked like, what it sounded like, what it smelled like, in the years just before everything changed. The house itself first, because the house is the world we're about to spend the next 2.5 hours inside, and I want you to be able to see it the way the family who lives here sees it. From the outside, it is unremarkable in the most beautiful way. A modest single-story home in a neighbourhood that was built in 1947 or 1948, when the soldiers came home and the country needed somewhere to put them. Levittown style, or one of the thousands of imitations of Levittown that went up across the country in those years. 2 bedrooms, maybe 3, a kitchen at the back, a small dining nook, a front room with a fireplace that does not get used as often as it used to because the gas furnace in the basement does most of the work now, a bathroom with pink or pale green tile depending on the year the house was finished, a driveway, a single-car garage, a yard front and back, a clothesline strung between 2 metal poles. The smell of the house changes by season, and tonight it is somewhere in the early fall, and the windows are still open just a few inches in the front room. The curtains move slightly. You can hear the leaves outside, the dry rustle of them when a small wind passes. Inside, the air is warm but not hot. The kitchen is the warmest room because the gas range has been on most of the evening. The bedrooms are cooler. The bathroom, with the hot water from the children's baths still hanging in it, is the most humid room in the house. You can stand in the hallway and feel the change in the air as you pass each door. I find myself genuinely admiring the geography of a house like this. Not because it was large, it was not. The whole thing is somewhere around 900 square feet, maybe 1,000. By modern standards, it is small. A family of 4 lives here comfortably, but only because the rooms are used the way rooms used to be used. The kitchen is for cooking and eating breakfast. The dining nook is for supper. The front room is for sitting. The bedrooms are for sleeping. There is no room for staring at a screen because the screen has not yet arrived to demand its own room. Every room has a purpose, and every purpose has a room, and the family moves through the house according to the hour of the day. The gas range deserves a moment of its own, because it is the centre of this household in a way that I want to make sure you can feel. It is not the hearth that the colonial farmhouse had. It is not the wood stove that the woman's mother cooked on. It is a white enamelled gas range with 4 burners and an oven below and a small broiler drawer at the bottom, and it has been the most expensive thing in the kitchen since the day it arrived in 1949. It replaced an older range that had given up after the war. This one was bought on credit, paid off over 18 months. It is gleaming. It is wiped down twice a day. The chrome handles catch the light from the overhead bulb, and the porcelain top has not yet developed the network of fine cracks that 30 years of use will eventually leave on its surface. The pilot lights hiss faintly. If you stand close to the range, you can hear them, a low, constant whisper. The kettle is on the back left burner, just warm, not boiling. There will be one more cup of tea before bed, probably for the woman, sometimes for the husband if he cannot sleep. The percolator is on the right, finished now. The smell of coffee, which has been in this kitchen continuously since 5:30 in the morning, is finally beginning to fade. It will be back tomorrow at 5:30 again. The light in the kitchen is yellow. The bulb is 60 watts, maybe 75, and it is the only source of light in the room right now. The fluorescent overhead that some kitchens have by 1955 has not yet been installed in this one. The corners of the room are dim. The shadow of the dish drainer falls across the counter. The window above the sink shows nothing now except the reflection of the kitchen back at itself. Outside, beyond that window, the yard is dark. The clothesline is still up, the wooden clothespins still clipped along it from this morning. The laundry was brought in before supper. The line is empty. The woman is wearing what she's worn all day, a house dress, cotton, faded in the way that household cotton fades after 100 washings. Maybe blue, maybe yellow, maybe a small print of flowers. An apron tied at the waist, the apron pockets containing whatever has been put into them through the day. A clothespin, a bobby pin, a scrap of paper with a phone number written on it. Her shoes are flat. Her hair is set, but the pins are loose. By the time she goes to bed, the pins will be tightened, the curlers will be in, the cold cream will be on. But that is not yet. Right now, she's in the kitchen, the dishes are waiting, and the radio is playing one of the evening programs in the front room, and the children are calling from upstairs that they need a towel. She calls back. She crosses the kitchen, takes a clean towel from the linen drawer in the dining nook, and walks toward the stairs. As she passes the front room, she touches the back of her husband's chair without thinking about it. He looks up, smiles slightly, returns to his paper. She goes up the stairs. The wooden treads creak in the places they have always creaked. She knows which steps make sound and which ones do not. If she wanted to come down later without waking anyone, she could. Now I want to ask you something, and I mean this genuinely. When was the last time you lived in a house where you knew every sound it made, where you knew which floorboard creaked, which door stuck in summer humidity, which window rattled when a truck went by on the street outside? There is a kind of intimacy a person develops with a house that they have lived in for years. The 1950s American family more often than not lived in a house like that. They had moved in just after the war, or just after a child was born, or just after a promotion came through. They were not going to move again. The mortgage was 15 years, sometimes 20. The house was the project of a lifetime, and so the house and the people who lived in it became, slowly over years, one continuous thing. The house knew them. They knew the house. The bathroom upstairs is small, white tile on the floor in a hexagonal pattern, the grout slightly darkened in the corners. Pink tile on the walls halfway up. The tub is cast iron, heavy, with feet that lift it just slightly off the floor. The fixtures are chrome and they are not yet pitted with age. The mirror over the sink is foggy from the steam. The smaller child is in the tub now, the older one waiting in the hallway in a robe, hair already wet from her own bath earlier. There is a bar of ivory soap in the dish on the side of the tub, the white smooth shape of it half worn down. A washcloth hangs over the faucet. A bottle of shampoo, Halo or Prel depending on the year, sits on the corner of the tub. The smell of the bathroom is steam and soap and that particular wet smell of a small child who has just been washed. The woman kneels beside the tub. She rinses the child's hair with a small enamelled cup, water cascading down. The child laughs. The woman is laughing too. This is the part of the day she's been moving toward since 5:30 in the morning. The children clean, the children tired, the children almost ready for bed. Have you ever knelt beside a bathtub and washed a small child's hair? If you have, you know there is no other moment in a day that feels quite like it. The warm water on your forearm, the slick soap, the small head tipping back in absolute trust. The child looking up at you with eyes that are not yet thinking about anything except the warmth of the water and the smell of the soap and the fact that you are right there. I am not proposing that this was only available in the 1950s. It was not. Mothers have been kneeling beside tubs for as long as there have been tubs. What I am proposing is that the world around that moment was different in 1950 than it would be in 1960. Quieter. Less full of competing sound. Less hurried. The bath was the bath. It was not happening while a television played in the next room, because there was no television in the next room. The radio downstairs was playing, but the radio asked less of you than the television would. You could hear it without looking at it. The bath was uninterrupted in a way that, 10 years later, baths would no longer entirely be. The child is lifted out of the tub, wrapped in the large towel set down on the bath mat. The woman dries her, head to foot, the way she's done 1,000 times before. The child's skin is pink from the warm water. The hair is combed out. The tangles worked through gently, the part made down the middle. A nightgown is pulled over her head. The flannel kind, the soft white cotton kind, depending on the year. The buttons are done up. The child yawns. The mother kisses the top of her head. The smell of ivory soap and damp child hair fills the bathroom. The older child is next, but she has already had her bath, and she only needs her teeth brushed and her hair combed and her own nightgown pulled on. She does most of it herself. The woman sits on the edge of the tub and watches. She does not say much. The bathroom is steamy. The light is yellow. The mirror is fogged. The water in the tub is still hot. She drains it slowly so the pipes do not bang. She wipes down the porcelain with a cloth. She hangs the washcloths over the side of the tub to dry. She picks up the wet towel and the discarded clothes and the small wet socks and carries them out of the bathroom toward the laundry hamper at the end of the hall. The hallway is dim. There's one bulb in a fixture overhead. The walls are wallpapered, a small pattern, faded a little where the children's hands have brushed against it as they grew. There is a framed photograph on one wall. A wedding photograph, maybe, or a photograph of her parents, or of her brother who did not come back from the Pacific. Most houses in 1950 have at least one photograph like that on a wall, sometimes two. The losses of the war are not yet far enough away to have become history. They are still in living rooms and hallways, in the small black framed photographs that the families lived with for the rest of their lives. The children's bedroom is at the end of the hall. 2 single beds made up that morning with the corners tucked tight, a small dresser between them, a nightlight in the wall socket, a small bulb that gives off a yellow glow about the size of a quarter, a toy box at the foot of one bed, a doll on the pillow of the other. The window is closed but not curtained yet. The woman draws the curtains. She turns down the bedspreads. She gets the children into bed, one and then the other. She listens to the older one's prayers. The smaller one is almost asleep before her head is on the pillow. The woman stands in the doorway for a moment and looks at them both, the way mothers have always looked at sleeping children, and then she switches off the overhead light. The night light stays on. The hallway light stays on. She closes the door not quite all the way, leaving a slim strip of yellow light visible from inside the bedroom. Now we're back in the hallway. The house has gone quieter. The radio is still playing in the front room, but the children's voices are gone. The husband has not moved from the chair. The dishes are still waiting in the kitchen. There is perhaps 45 minutes of evening left. I want to take a long breath here because the geography of this last hour is going to slow down now, the way the house itself is slowing down. Everything from this point forward is the quiet part, the part that, in 1954 or 55, when the television finally arrives in this house, will be the part that disappears first. The bath will still happen. The children will still need to be put to bed. The dishes will still need to be washed. But the slow, quiet hour between the children going to sleep and the parents going to bed, the hour that in 1950 was spent doing small things in small ways, that hour is the one that will be replaced almost completely by the television. And so I want to spend time with it now, while we still can, while the world we're sitting inside has not yet been rearranged. The woman comes down the stairs. The wood creaks where it creaks. She does not turn on a light in the dining nook. She has done this trip so many times in the half-dark that she does not need light. She enters the kitchen. The radio is still on in the front room. She can hear it. A program is ending and another is beginning. The Jack Benny program, perhaps, or a quiet music hour, or news at the top of the hour and then back to the variety show. The volume is low, her husband has the radio on the way, another family in another decade might have a fireplace on. A presence in the room, a sound that fills the silence without demanding attention. She fills the sink with hot water. She adds a small amount of dish soap, Lux or Ivory or whatever was on sale at the A&P this week. The smell of the soap rises with the steam. She washes the dishes by hand. There is no dishwasher in this kitchen. There will not be one for another 15 years at least, and even then, only if the family can afford it. The dishes go into the sink one at a time. She uses a dishcloth, not a sponge. The dishcloth is rinsed and wrung out between dishes. The plates come first, then the glasses, then the silverware, then the pots and pans at the end. Her hands are red from the hot water by the time she's done. She does not wear rubber gloves. The rubber gloves are still mostly a post-war luxury, and she has not bought them yet. Her hands have been in hot dishwater every single night of her adult life. The skin is rougher than her mother's was, and her mother's hands were rougher than her grandmother's, and somewhere in this small genealogy of hands, you can trace the entire history of American domestic life. Each generation a little less rough, each generation a little more removed from the work of keeping a household alive. I want to pause here for a moment, because I keep coming back to the hands of the 1940s housewife you may have heard about from a previous story, the hands that pressure canned tomatoes and rolled out pie crust, and scrubbed laundry on a washboard before the wringer washer arrived. The hands of the 1950s housewife are different. They are softer. They have a washing machine in the basement that does what the washboard used to do. They have an electric mixer that does what the wooden spoon used to do. They have a vacuum cleaner that does what the rag rug beater used to do. But they still wash the dishes by hand. They still iron the shirts by hand. They still mend the socks by hand. The technology of the post-war kitchen has eased some things and not others, and the things it has not eased are the things that the hands continue to do, every night, in every kitchen, in every house, on every street. The dishes are washed. They are stacked in the dish drainer beside the sink to drip dry overnight. She wipes down the counters. She wipes the top of the gas range. She runs a damp cloth around the edge of the sink. She rinses out the dishcloth, wrings it out, and drapes it over the faucet to dry. She folds the dish towel and lays it across the oven handle. The kitchen is now clean. Tomorrow morning at 5:30 she will return to it and begin again. Tonight it is ready to be left. She turns off the kitchen light. The room is dark now except for the faint glow of the pilot lights on the range and the soft light coming in from the dining nook. She walks toward the front room. The front room is the room where, by 1960, the television will sit in a large wooden cabinet against the long wall. But tonight, in 1950 or 51, the television has not yet arrived in this house. The long wall holds, instead, a bookcase with a glass front, the family Bible on a small lectern of its own beside it, a framed photograph of the children, and a clock that ticks faintly from the mantel. The fireplace below the clock is cold. The screen is in front of it. The andirons are clean. A small pile of split wood sits in a brass holder to the side, ready for the cold weather that has not yet fully arrived. Above the fireplace, on the mantel, beside the clock, is a small ceramic dog, a wedding photograph, and a candy dish that has been there since the wedding, and has held the same wrapped peppermints for what feels like several months. The radio is in the corner. It is a console radio, floor standing, a wooden cabinet about the size of a small armoire. The speaker is covered in fabric, slightly faded. The dial is illuminated faintly from inside, an orange glow behind the numbers. The radio has been on most of the evening. It will be on for another half hour. After that it will be turned off, and the only sound in the house will be the clock on the mantel and the refrigerator humming faintly in the kitchen and the wind outside in the leaves. The husband is in his chair. The newspaper is in his lap. He has been reading it slowly. He has not turned the page in several minutes. He is listening to the radio. He looks up when his wife comes into the room. He does not say anything. He smiles slightly. She crosses to the chair across from his, her chair, the one with the arms that are slightly worn down where her hands rest. A small table beside it holds a basket of mending, a pile of socks with small holes in the heels, a pair of his trousers with a loose button, a child's dress that needs a hem turned up. She sits. She picks up the first sock. She threads a needle. The radio plays. The clock ticks. The room is warm. The light from the floor lamp beside her chair is soft and yellow, and falls directly on the work in her hands. Her husband turns a page of the newspaper. The page makes a faint rustling sound. From upstairs, no sound at all. The children are asleep. This is the quiet part. This is the hour I want to sit with you in for as long as you will let me. I want to tell you about the radio program that is playing right now, because it matters more to the texture of this evening than perhaps anything else I could describe to you. By 1950, the great age of radio is already starting to feel its first tremors. The television sets are appearing in the windows of the appliance stores. The radio networks know what is coming. But for right now, on this particular evening, the radio is still the centre of the entertainment household. The Jack Benny programme is still on. Fibber McGee and Molly is still on. The Lux Radio Theatre is still bringing Hollywood scripts to the air. Amos and Andy is still drawing huge audiences. The shows are funny in a way that I think is sometimes difficult to translate to modern listening, because the humour depends on familiarity. The audience knows the characters. They have known the characters for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Jack Benny is not a comedian on a show. Jack Benny is the slightly cheap, slightly vain, eternally young at 39-year-old man who's been in their living room every Sunday night since 1932. He is a member of the family in a way that television, with all its larger emotional power, would never quite manage to replicate. The radio is also a thing the family listens to together. This is the part that strikes me most when I read the accounts of radio-era family life. The whole family is in the same room. Sometimes the radio is on at low volume while other things happen. Sometimes the radio is the main event, the thing that everyone has gathered for. But the family is together. The husband is in his chair. The wife is in her chair. The children, if they are awake, are on the floor with their schoolbooks, or playing some quiet game, or sometimes simply listening. The radio is a hearth. It is a centre. It is the thing that pulls the family into one room and keeps them there. When was the last time you sat in a room with your family, all of you? No screens, just one voice coming out of one piece of furniture, telling a story together. I'm not asking that to make anyone feel bad. I'm asking because I think it is worth sitting with the question. The shape of evening time changed when the television came. It did not just replace the radio, it changed what evening was for. The radio was something to listen to while you mended a sock or read the paper. The television became something that, by its very nature, demanded to be looked at. The hands that had been busy stopped being busy. The eyes that had been on other things were drawn to the screen. The room rearranged itself around the new centre. But that is not yet. Right now, in the front room of this house, the radio plays and the husband reads and the wife mends and the clock ticks and the world is small and quiet and contained. The first sock is done. She moves to the second one. She uses a darning egg, a small wooden egg-shaped object that fits inside the heel of the sock and provides a hard surface to work against. The egg is smooth and dark from years of use. It belonged to her mother. Her mother used it to darn her father's socks during the Depression. The egg has been in this family for 30 years, maybe more. The needles she uses are her own, but the egg is older than her marriage. She does not think about this most evenings. She thinks about it now because I'm asking you to think about it. And a small part of her mind, the part that I am borrowing, has lit briefly on the egg in her hand, and the woman who held it before her and the daughter who, 20 years from now, will hold it in her own hand and remember. There is something about handed-down objects that I want to spend a moment with. In a 1950s American household, the proportion of objects that were inherited or hand-me-downs was much higher than it is now. The egg, the cast-iron skillet in the kitchen, which had also been her mother's, the wedding china, which was a wedding gift from her husband's parents and had been in his family, the dining room table, which was second-hand when they bought it, and which was probably built in the 1890s, the wedding ring, which had been her grandmother's, the thimble in her sewing basket, which had been her aunt's, the mantel clock, which had been a wedding gift from her own parents, and which had been their wedding clock. The household was full of objects with histories that were known. Each one had a story. Each one had been touched by hands that the woman and her husband had loved. I am not proposing we go back to that. The mass-produced world of post-war America was already making household objects cheaper, more disposable, more easily replaced. The shift was already happening. But I think there is something worth noticing in the difference between a house that is full of objects with stories and a house that is full of objects that came from a catalogue last week. The texture of evening time is different when you are mending a sock with your mother's darning egg. The hands are doing more than just the work. They are also remembering. they are also being touched by every other hand that ever held this object. The egg is a small bridge across generations. The sock is a small bridge across generations. The work itself is a kind of inheritance. There is something about constraint that sharpens appreciation, and I think the post-war household, even in its growing prosperity, still understood constraint in a way that we have largely forgotten. The woman in this chair was a child during the Depression. She came of age during the war. She has seen what it looks like when the things in the house cannot be replaced. She has seen what it looks like when sugar is rationed, and butter is rationed, and meat is rationed, and stockings are unobtainable for love or money. She mends the sock not because she cannot afford a new pair of socks. She mends the sock because mending the sock is what one does. The sock has a small hole. The hole can be closed. The sock continues. This is the order of things. The world she grew up in did not allow for any other order, and so even now in 1951, with the war years a few summers in the past, she mends the sock without thinking about it. The work itself is older than her conscious memory of why it must be done. The radio program ends. There is a moment of silence, and then a commercial. She does not really listen to the commercial. Her husband does not really listen to the commercial. The commercial is for something: a laundry soap, a car, a cigarette brand. She has heard variations of this commercial 1,000 times. It washes over her without making contact. I want to pause here because I think the texture of commercials in this period is something worth describing, because it is so different from what advertising has become. The radio commercial in 1950 is, more often than not, a small dramatic scene. A husband comes home from work. He sniffs the air appreciatively. His wife reveals that the secret to the wonderful supper is some brand of cooking oil or shortening. The husband praises her cooking. The wife thanks the cooking oil. The commercial ends. The whole thing takes about 30 seconds. The next commercial might be a jingle, a short musical phrase sung by a chorus, repeating the name of the product. The third commercial might be the show's host himself or herself, stepping out of the program to tell the audience about the sponsor. The commercials are part of the texture of the evening. They are not interruptions in the way that modern commercials are interruptions. They are woven into the experience. The audience knows the sponsor of the show, knows the commercial voice of the brand, knows the small dramatic scenes that have been repeating for years. There is an intimacy even to the advertising that television, with its larger budgets and faster cycles, would slowly erode. The second sock is done. She lifts it, examines it, sets it on the small table beside her. She picks up the trousers next. The loose button, a simple repair. She threads a different needle with a heavier thread. She works carefully. The light from the floor lamp falls on her hands. Her husband turns another page of the newspaper. The radio is back on. Another program is starting. Music, perhaps. The Glenn Miller Orchestra, or a recording of Bing Crosby, or one of the band programs that still occupy a place on the evening dial. The music is gentle. The clarinet rises and falls. The brass sits underneath it. The percussion is restrained. This is not the loud, bright music of 1959. This is music written for a world that still remembers the war and that values, in its quiet evening hours, the kind of melody you could hum to yourself afterward. The husband reaches over and turns the volume up just a small fraction. He likes this song. His wife glances up, smiles, returns to the trousers. The music fills the room. It fills the spaces between the tick of the clock. It fills the small silences between the rustling of the newspaper and the soft sound of the needle going through the cloth. There is a long stretch of time in this hour where almost nothing happens. The clock ticks, the radio plays, the needle goes in and out of the sock or the trouser or the dress hem. The husband reads, the children sleep, the kitchen is dark, the bathroom is dark, the bedrooms are dark, the hallway light is on but dim. The front room is the only room in the house that is fully lit, and even here, the light is yellow and soft and falls in pools rather than filling the room. The shadows in the corners are deep. The room is small. The world is small. The house is small. Beyond the front room, the rest of the house exists in a kind of held breath, waiting for the morning when everything will begin again. I want to ask you something now. Have you ever had an evening like this? Not in the past necessarily, but in your own life. An evening where you did one thing slowly, in one room, with one other person, with no screens, no notifications, no other voices coming in from outside the room. If you have, you know what kind of texture that evening had. The way time moves differently, the way the small sounds in the room become louder, the way you become aware, after a while, of your own breathing, and your companion's breathing, and the slight movement of the curtains in the window, and the way the floorboards settle as the house cools. If you have not had an evening like this in a long time, I want to gently suggest that you might consider one, not as a rejection of modern life, I am not making that argument, but as a small experiment in noticing what a different kind of evening feels like. You might be surprised by what comes back to you in it. The trousers are done, the button is on, she tugs at it gently to make sure. It holds. She folds the trousers and lays them across the arm of the chair to be put away in the morning. She picks up the child's dress, the hem. She turns it up and pins it in 3 places. She works around the hem with small even stitches. The thread is white. The dress is blue cotton. The dress is one her older daughter has nearly outgrown, and the hem is being turned up rather than let down, because the dress will go to the younger daughter when the older one has grown out of it entirely. The dress, like so many things in this house, will be in service for years. It will be worn first by one child, then by the other, then folded into a box of fabric scraps to be used as cleaning rags. The fabric will eventually wear through and become genuinely too worn even for cleaning, and then it will be cut up and used for a quilt, or finally, after a decade of service, thrown away. The economy of fabric in the 1950s household is something I want to spend a moment on, because it is one of the things that has most quietly disappeared from American domestic life. Fabric was expensive. New clothes were expensive. The cost of a child's dress in 1950, in terms of an hour of work, was many times what it would be in 1990. And so, dresses were made, not just bought. Patterns were saved. Fabric scraps were saved. The leftover material from making one dress would be used to make a doll's dress, or a small apron, or a quilt block. Nothing was thrown away that could still be used. The fabric scrap basket in this house, somewhere in a closet upstairs, contains pieces from every garment that has been made in this family for 10 years. The blue from the older daughter's first dress, the white eyelet from a christening gown, a small piece of the grey flannel from her husband's first suit. The basket is a kind of fabric autobiography. It would never occur to her to throw any of it away. I'm not proposing we go back to that. I want to be clear about that. The disposable culture of the post-war years, which by the late 1950s was already in full swing, was in some ways a relief from the constant repair and reuse and making do that the 1940s had required. The women I have spent time thinking about, the women who survived the war years on the home front, did not want their daughters to have to mend every garment until it could not be mended anymore. They wanted their daughters to be able to buy a new dress when the old one no longer fit. The growing prosperity of the post-war years was, in part, a deliberate rejection of the constraint of the war years. It is just that, somewhere along the way, in the process of leaving behind the constraint, we also left behind some of the things that constraint had built. The scrap basket, the mended sock, the dress passed from one daughter to the next, the careful relationship with the objects of daily life. The dress is done, the hem is even. She folds it and lays it on top of the trousers. The basket on the small table beside her chair is nearly empty now. There is one more pair of socks at the bottom, but she will leave those for tomorrow. Tomorrow there will be more mending. There is always more mending, the basket is never fully empty. The radio program changes again. The clock on the mantel ticks. The fire is unlit, but the screen is still in front of it. The husband has set the newspaper aside and has picked up a book. He reads slowly, the way he has read everything since he came back from the war. He was wounded. He does not talk about it. The book is something practical, a history, a biography, not a novel. He reads about other men's lives with the careful attention of a man whose own life has been mostly small and quiet since 1945 and who is, in his own way, still figuring out what to do with the fact that he came back when others did not. His wife knows this. She does not say anything about it. She has known it for as long as she's been married to him. She lets him read. She has her own basket, her own work, her own thoughts. The intimacy of the front room in 1950 is not the intimacy of constant conversation. It is the intimacy of two people who can sit in the same room for an hour without speaking, who can hear the same music and feel the same warmth, and watch the same fire die down in the grate, and who do not need to fill the silence with words because the silence itself is a kind of conversation. Have you ever sat in a room with someone for an hour and not spoken, and felt closer to them at the end of it than at the beginning? It is a particular kind of closeness, and it is hard to come by now. There is always something asking to be looked at. There is always a notification. There is always a video, a message, a feed. The hour of silence between two people who love each other has become a rare thing. It used to be the most ordinary thing in the world. It used to be how married people spent most of their evenings. The radio was on, but it was not a conversation. The book was open, but it was not a conversation. The needle was moving, but it was not a conversation. And yet, the two people were together, and at the end of the hour, when one of them stood up and stretched and said it was time for bed, they would look at each other across the room and feel as known and as loved as they had ever felt in their lives. The clock strikes the half hour. A soft chime. She glances at it. It is 9:30. The children have been asleep for an hour. The radio is winding down toward the end of the evening programming. By 10 the major shows will be over, and the late-night music programs will begin, and the volume will be lower still. By 10:30 the radio will be off entirely. By 11 the lights will be off, the doors will be locked, the dishes will be drying in the drainer, the trousers will be hanging in the closet, the alarm will be set for 5:30, and the house will be asleep. Now I want to walk you out of the front room for a moment because I want to show you something about the rest of the house at this hour. The other rooms, the ones that are not lit, the ones where nothing is happening but where the small textures of 1950s domestic life are still present in the dark. The kitchen, again. The pilot lights still hiss faintly on the range. The refrigerator hums in the corner. The clock on the kitchen wall ticks, but you have to be standing very close to it to hear. The dishes drip in the drainer. A small drop of water falls from a plate to the metal tray below it every few minutes. The towel folded over the oven handle is still slightly damp. The percolator is empty. The coffee can is in the cupboard, ready for tomorrow morning. The bread box on the counter contains half a loaf of yesterday's bread. The cookie jar contains 5 cookies, oatmeal raisin, which she made on Saturday. The smell of the kitchen now is the cooling smell. The roast beef is fully faded. The coffee is fully faded. What remains is the soap from the dishwater and the faint wax of the linoleum and the cooling smell of the gas range as it returns to room temperature. The dining nook. The table is bare. The chairs are pushed in. A small bowl of fruit sits in the centre. 2 apples, 3 oranges. The wallpaper is a pattern of small flowers, faded along the bottom where the children have brushed against it. A framed print on the wall, something pastoral. A scene of a country lane with a fence and a pasture and a single tree. The lamp on the small sideboard is off. The room exists in shadow. If you stood in the doorway and looked at it, you would see the dim outlines of the table and chairs and the bowl of fruit, and you would smell, faintly, the cinnamon from the cinnamon roll one of the children had after school. The hallway. The light is on but dim. The wallpaper is the same throughout the house. The framed photograph of the brother who did not come back from the Pacific catches the hallway light. He is in his uniform. He is smiling. He is 22 years old. He will be 22 years old forever. The woman walks past this photograph many times a day. She does not stop and look at it most days. But every now and then, late at night, when the house is asleep and she is going from one room to another, she will pause beside it for a moment, and the small flicker of his face in the hallway light will catch her, and she will stand there, and the past will be present in the way that the past is always present in houses where people loved someone who did not come home. The children's bedroom. The door is not quite closed. The hallway light spills in through the slim gap. The nightlight inside the room is on. The 2 beds, the 2 sleeping children. The smaller one has kicked off the covers in her sleep. The older one is curled up on her side the way she has slept since she was a baby. Their breathing is even. Their faces are smooth in the way that children's faces are smooth only when they are asleep. The room smells of soap and clean cotton, and the faint sweetness that small children have in their hair. The toy box is closed. The doll is on the floor beside one of the beds. The other doll is in the bed, tucked under the arm of the smaller child. The master bedroom is at the other end of the hall. The door is open. The room is dark. The bed is made up, but the bedspread is folded back at the foot, ready to be turned down later. Her nightgown is laid out on her side of the bed. His pajamas are laid out on his side. The windows open just an inch. The curtains move slightly. The smell of the room is lavender from the small sachet she keeps in the dresser drawer with her stockings, and clean cotton from the sheets, and the faint cedar smell from the chest at the foot of the bed where the winter blankets are stored. The dresser holds a few small things, a jewellery box, a photograph in a silver frame of her and her husband on their wedding day in 1946, a small bottle of cold cream, a hairbrush with a few of her hairs caught in it, a bottle of perfume, half full, that she received as a Christmas gift 2 years ago and uses sparingly only for special occasions. The closet is shut. The chest at the foot of the bed is shut. The room exists in a quiet, held state, waiting for the two people who will soon come up the stairs and turn down the bedspread and pull on their nightclothes and slide under the cool sheets and turn off the lamps and lie in the dark side by side, the way they have done every night since the spring of 1946, when they first moved into this house and the war was over and the world was somehow supposed to begin again. The basement is below the kitchen. The basement is unfinished. The walls are concrete. The floor is concrete. There is a furnace in one corner, a coal furnace converted to gas about 2 years ago. There is a washing machine in another corner, a wringer washer, electric, that she runs every Monday morning, a wash tub beside it, a clothesline strung across the basement ceiling for the days when the weather will not permit drying outside, a small workbench against one wall where her husband does small repairs, a pegboard above the workbench with hammers and screwdrivers, and a small saw and a level, a jar of nails, a jar of screws, a jar of washers, a folded canvas drop cloth, a coffee can full of bent nails that he has straightened out and is keeping to use again. The smell of the basement is concrete and oil and the faint mineral smell of the coal that used to be stored down here. The basement is cool. It is always cool, even in summer. It is the coldest room in the house in winter except for the porch. The furnace ticks faintly as it cycles on, and the warm air rises through the ducts to the rooms above. Now I want to go back to the front room because the husband has just set down his book. He stretches. He looks at the clock on the mantel. He looks at his wife. She looks up from the empty mending basket. The radio is playing a soft instrumental piece. The fire is unlit. The room is warm. He stands. He crosses to the radio. He turns the dial slowly until the music fades, then clicks the radio off entirely. The room is silent except for the clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. She stands. She picks up the trousers and the dress and the socks. She carries them through the dining nook and up the stairs. The trousers go in his closet. The dress goes in the older daughter's drawer. The socks go in his sock drawer. The basket she will bring up tomorrow. She comes back down the stairs. She checks the front door. It is locked. She checks the back door. It is locked. She turns off the light in the dining nook. She turns off the light in the hallway. The front room lamp is still on. Her husband is in the kitchen drinking a glass of water from the tap. The light over the sink is on now. She joins him. She drinks a glass of water herself. They do not speak. They have not spoken in perhaps an hour. They do not need to. They turn off the kitchen light together. The pilot lights on the range glow faintly blue. They walk back through the front room. He turns off the floor lamp. The room goes dark. They go up the stairs. The treads creak in the same places they have always creaked. They reach the top of the stairs. They pause for a moment outside the children's bedroom door. They can hear the soft breathing of both children. They look at each other. They smile. They go into the bathroom together. The teeth are brushed. The face is washed. The cold cream is applied. The curlers are put in. The pajamas are put on. The nightgown is put on. The bedspread is turned down. The lamps are turned off. They lie in the dark, side by side. The window is open an inch. The curtains move slightly. A car passes on the street outside, far away. The sound rises and fades. The house settles. The clock on the mantel downstairs ticks softly, just barely audible through the floor. He reaches for her hand. She gives it to him. They do not speak. They lie there in the dark, and the world outside is small and contained and quiet. And within 10 years, almost none of this will be quite the same. The television sets are already in some of the houses on this block. They are large wooden cabinets with small round screens. They are expensive. They are coveted. The neighbours who do not yet have one know exactly which neighbours do. The Andersons across the street got theirs last spring. The Brennans on the corner got theirs in the fall. The Petersons 2 doors down got theirs as a Christmas gift from her parents. The children in the neighbourhood already know which houses to go to after school to watch Howdy Doody. The adults already know which houses to be invited to on Friday nights for the prize fights. The centre of social life on the block has already begun, in small ways, to shift. In this house, the television will arrive in 1953. It will be a Zenith console, 21 inches, black and white, with a small set of doors that close over the screen when it is not in use. It will be placed in the front room, against the long wall where the bookcase currently sits. The bookcase will be moved to the dining nook. The fireplace will be partially blocked by the new television. The chairs in the front room will be rearranged so that they face the screen rather than each other. The radio, the floor-standing console radio, will be moved to the basement, where it will remain, mostly unused, until the husband finally sells it at a yard sale in 1961 for $3. The evenings will change. The dishes will still be washed by hand. The children will still be bathed. The teeth will still be brushed. The covers will still be turned down. But the hour between the children going to bed and the parents going to bed, the hour we have just spent together, the hour of mending and reading and quiet companionship and silence, that hour will become an hour spent in front of a screen. Not always, but often. Eventually, mostly. The wife will still mend, but she will mend while watching. The husband will still read, but the book will compete with the screen, and the screen will, eventually, win. I want to be careful here not to make this into something it was not. The television was not a tragedy. It was, in many ways, a gift. It brought entertainment into homes that had been quiet and limited. It brought news and weather and sports and drama into the front rooms of families that had never seen these things before. It brought the world into the living room. It brought, for many people, a kind of expansion of imagination and experience that nothing before it had quite managed. I am not romanticising what came before. I am not arguing that the radio era was better than the television era. I am just saying that something was lost. The hour we have just walked through together, the slow, quiet hour of small work done in small rooms with one other person, and almost no sound, and the clock ticking on the mantel, and the children sleeping upstairs, that hour was a particular thing, and it has largely disappeared. It would be worth remembering, I think, even if there is no way to fully bring it back. When we gained the ability to fill every silent moment with content, what did we lose in the exchange? It is not a question I have a confident answer to. I find myself sitting with it more than answering it. The husband and wife in this bedroom, lying side by side in the dark holding hands, with no screens and no notifications and no other voices, are doing something that I think their grandchildren will rarely do in quite the same way. Not because their grandchildren love each other less. They will love each other every bit as much, but because the world around the act of love will have become so much louder and so much faster that the quiet held moments will be harder to find and harder to protect and harder to recognise as the precious things they are. There is something about the slow rhythm of a 1950s evening that I have been trying to put my finger on, and I think I am beginning to understand what it is. The hour we have walked through was not an empty hour. It was full of things. The dishes were washed. The children were bathed, the socks were mended, the trousers were repaired, the dress hem was turned, the radio played, the book was read, the water was drunk, the doors were locked, the teeth were brushed, the cold cream was applied, the pajamas were put on, the bedspread was turned down, the hands were held, the night settled, the clock ticked. None of this was empty. All of it was small. The size of the work was the point. Each thing was given its full measure of attention. Nothing was multitasked, nothing was rushed. The hour was the hour, and the hour was filled with the small particular things that the hour was for. And at the end of the hour, the people who had lived through it together knew each other better, and the house was tucked in for the night and the morning was ready to be met. I find myself genuinely admiring it. Not because I want to live there. I do not. I am writing this story on a computer at a desk with a lamp that I bought on the internet, and a coffee that I made in a machine that has more buttons than the entire kitchen we have just spent time in. The world I live in has things that 1950 would have found miraculous, and I would not give those things up. But I find myself admiring the people in this front room, the shape of their evening, the pace of their hands, the silence between them, the way the smallness of their life was in its own way a kind of completeness. The husband has fallen asleep. His breathing has changed. It is slower now, deeper. His hand is still in his wife's hand. She lies awake for another few minutes. She's thinking about tomorrow. The laundry has to be done. The grocery list has to be made. The roast for Sunday has to be taken out of the freezer in the morning. The older child has a school program on Wednesday. The younger child needs new shoes. The window in the dining nook is sticking. She needs to ask her husband to look at it. The fall is coming. The storm windows need to come down from the attic. The thoughts pass through her mind in the way that the thoughts of a tired wife at the end of a long day pass through the mind. Without urgency, without anxiety, just the small, steady accounting of a household that she's in charge of. She's 27 years old. She's been married for 5 years. She has 2 children. She's happy. She's not thought about her happiness in those words because she does not have to. The happiness is the air she breathes. The smallness of her life is its own kind of vastness, and she has not yet had any reason to question whether the vastness will continue, because in 1950, in this neighbourhood, in this house, the vastness feels permanent. It is not permanent. Nothing is permanent. The children will grow up. The husband will eventually die. The house will be sold to another family in 1973. The neighbourhood will change. The television will come and the radio will go and the dishwasher will come and the hand washing will go and the prepared dinners will come and the long suppers will go and the hours will get faster and the rooms will get fuller and the silence will get rarer and the world will, year by year, become a different world. But that is all in the future. Tonight, in this bedroom, in this small house on this quiet street, the wife is falling asleep beside her husband. Her hand is in his. The window is open an inch. The curtains move slightly. The clock on the mantel downstairs ticks faintly. The children breathe softly in the room down the hall. The kitchen is dark. The dishes are drying. The radio is off. The doors are locked. The world is held. Now I want to ask you something, and I mean this gently. What does your last hour before bed look like? Not in some idealized version, not in the version you would put on a holiday card. The actual hour. The hour between when you start winding down and when you turn off the light. What does it sound like? What is in it? Who is in it with you? What are your hands doing? What are you looking at? What are you listening to? I'm not asking to make you feel bad about your evening. I'm not making any argument about whether your evening is better or worse than the one we have just walked through. I'm just asking you to notice. Because the hour we have spent together, the hour in the front room with the clock ticking and the radio playing and the needle going through the cloth, was an hour that was once typical. It was an hour that most American adults experienced most nights, in some version, for several decades. And then it was not. The shift was so gradual that most people did not notice it happening. The television came and at first it was a novelty, and then it was a feature, and then it was the centre of the room, and then it was the centre of the evening, and then it was the centre of the family. By 1970 the rearrangement was complete. By 1990 the television had been joined by the computer, and by 2010 the phone had joined them both. The screens kept multiplying. The hour kept compressing. The small, slow things kept giving way. And here is the thing I want to be careful about because I think it is important. The hour we have walked through together was not perfect. The marriage was not perfect. The household was not perfect. The wife was tired. The husband was carrying things from the war that he did not talk about. The neighbourhood had its own troubles. The country had its own troubles. The decade we are sitting inside, the early 1950s, had its own dark corners. The Cold War was beginning to settle in. McCarthy was about to begin his hearings. The civil rights movement was just starting to gather its strength. The world was not, in 1950, a simpler and happier place than the world we live in now. It was a different place. It had its own sorrows. It had its own injustices. It had its own things to be reckoned with. But the texture of the evening, the hour we have just spent inside, was a real thing. And it was a thing that the world, almost without noticing, traded away over the course of the next 20 years. I think it is worth understanding what we traded. Not because we should try to trade back. We cannot. The world has moved on, and the things that came after the television, and the dishwasher, and the prepared dinners and the screens have their own value. But understanding what was lost helps us understand what to look for now. The small, slow things. The single occupation of attention. The other person in the room whose silence is a kind of presence. The hour that is given to one thing and only one thing. These are not historical artifacts. They are available to us still. They are just harder to find now. There is something I find myself wanting to say, and I'm not sure exactly how to say it, so I'm going to try. The hour we have just walked through together, the hour in the front room with the clock and the radio and the mending and the reading, was not an hour of remarkable events. Nothing happened in it. No drama, no revelation, no turning point. It was, in every measurable way, an entirely ordinary hour, and that is why I wanted to spend time inside it. Because ordinary hours are, I think, the hours that make up most of a life. The dramatic hours, the turning points, the revelations are rare. The ordinary hours, the hours of mending and reading and silence and small companionship, are the substance. The way a life feels, the way a marriage feels, the way a family feels, is mostly determined by what the ordinary hours are like. And the ordinary hours of 1950 had a particular quality. They were slow, they were small, they were unhurried, they were quiet. They had room in them for noticing things. When we lost the radio era and gained the television era, and then lost the television era and gained the screen era, what changed was not just the content of the ordinary hours. What changed was the texture of them, the pace, the pull on the attention, the number of voices competing for the room, the constant low hum of information that, by 2020, would have become so loud that even sitting alone in a dark room with no devices, a person can still feel the pull of the information they are not currently checking. I'm not proposing we go back. I want to be very clear about that. The 1950s American home had real problems. The world inside it was, for many people, more constrained than the world that came after, and the constraint fell most heavily on the women who lived in that home. The wife in this bedroom, who has been mending socks for an hour and is now falling asleep beside her husband, has a kind of vastness in her smallness, but she also has a kind of smallness in her vastness. The choices available to her are fewer than her daughters will be. The future is in many ways already written for her. The career she might have had if she had been born in 1970 is not, in any meaningful sense, available to her in 1950. She is a homemaker. She will be a homemaker until the children are grown, and possibly afterward. The vastness of her life is real, but the vastness is the vastness of one room and one family and one house and one block, and many of the women who lived in homes like this one when they were older would have things to say about what was missing from that vastness that I would not want to dismiss. The story we're telling tonight is not the only story. The hour we have walked through together was real and beautiful in its way, but the world that contained the hour had its own injustices and its own constraints and its own things that needed to change. The 1960s would change them. The 1970s would change them more. The world we live in now, with all its noise and screens and pace, is in some real ways the world the women in those front rooms helped to build for their daughters by raising daughters who would not be content to spend their evenings only in the front room. So we are not, I want to insist on this, mourning the loss of the 1950s evening. We are noticing it. We are remembering it. We are sitting inside it for a few hours and feeling what it felt like, and then we are coming back out, and we are taking what we have learned from it back into our own evenings, and we are seeing what we want to do with it. Maybe we mend a sock. Maybe we sit in a room with someone we love for an hour without speaking. Maybe we turn off the screens for the last hour before bed. Maybe we do not. The point is the noticing, the point is the question. She's asleep now. Her hand is still in his. The window is open an inch. The curtains move slightly. The clock on the mantel downstairs ticks. The children breathe softly in the room down the hall. The kitchen is dark. The dishes are drying. The radio is off. The doors are locked. The world is held. Outside the window, the neighbourhood is quiet. A few lights are on in a few houses, but most of the windows are dark. A dog barks somewhere far away and then is quiet. The street is empty. The streetlight on the corner casts a circle of pale yellow light on the asphalt. A leaf falls from the tree across the street. Then another. The fall is beginning. In the house next door, a light goes off on the second floor. In the house across the street, a light is on in a kitchen window. Someone is up late. The young couple who just moved in. The wife is pregnant. She has been having trouble sleeping. She's in the kitchen making herself a cup of warm milk. She does not know it yet, but in 3 years she will give birth to a son, and that son will, in 1968, leave for Vietnam. The shadow of the war that ended 6 years ago, the shadow that this neighbourhood has not fully escaped, will return. The young woman in the kitchen across the street, making herself a cup of warm milk in the small hours of an autumn night in 1950, does not know any of this. She knows only that she cannot sleep, and that the warm milk sometimes helps, and that her husband is upstairs asleep, and that the world is, for now, held in a kind of fragile peace. The houses on the block are full of stories like this. The husband 3 doors down has a brother who did not come back from the Pacific. The woman across the alley lost 2 pregnancies before the daughter she now has. The retired couple on the corner have a son who is a Methodist minister in Indiana, and they do not see him as often as they would like. The widow at the end of the street lost her husband in 1947, and she has been alone in her house for 3 years, and her children, who are grown, write to her every week and visit when they can. Each house contains its own particular weight, its own particular history, its own particular hour of last things. The block is held together not by anything visible, but by the small accumulated weight of all of these private hours, layered on top of each other, night after night, for years. The clock on the mantel downstairs strikes 10, a soft chime. The house does not respond. Everyone is asleep. The wife in the master bedroom dreams of something she will not remember in the morning. The husband dreams of a man he knew in 1943, a man who is not alive anymore. He has this dream most nights. He has not told his wife about it. He is not going to. The children dream of nothing. They are too young to dream in the way that the adults dream. They are small dreaming animals curled in their beds, breathing softly, growing. The night extends. The hours pass. 11, midnight, 1, 2, 3. The house is dark and quiet. The clock ticks. The refrigerator hums. The pilot lights hiss faintly on the range. The streetlight outside casts its circle of pale yellow. The leaves continue to fall. The world turns. The morning is coming, and when it comes, the wife will be the first one awake, at 5:30 in the dark, in the kitchen, the percolator on, the kettle on, the day beginning again. But that is several hours away yet, and we have one more thing to do before we end this story together. I want to take you out of the house for a moment. I want to take you up the street to the corner, to the streetlight, and I want you to stand there with me and look back. The block is dark. Most of the houses are dark. The young woman across the street has finished her warm milk and turned off the kitchen light, and her window too is dark now. The neighbourhood is asleep. And I want you to see in your mind's eye that this entire block, this entire neighbourhood, this entire country, is in this moment in 1950, in the last hour before midnight, doing more or less the same thing. The dishes have been washed in hundreds of thousands of kitchens. The children have been bathed in hundreds of thousands of bathrooms. The socks have been mended in hundreds of thousands of front rooms. The radios have been turned off. The lights have been turned off. The doors have been locked. The husbands and wives have gone up the stairs together. The hands have been held. The country is asleep. This is the last decade in which it will be possible to say something like that with any confidence. The unified evening, the synchronized end of day, the entire country doing approximately the same small, slow things in approximately the same way at approximately the same hour. The television will fragment that synchrony, and then later the cable channels will fragment it further, and then later the internet will fragment it almost completely. By 2020, the synchronized evening is gone. People go to bed at different hours. People do different things in the last hour before sleep. People consume different content, in different rooms, on different devices, often in different time zones. The country is no longer asleep at the same time. The country is no longer awake at the same time. The country is no longer doing the same thing at any time at all. This is not necessarily a tragedy. It is, in some ways, freedom. This synchronized evening of 1950 was synchronized because the choices were fewer. The freedom of the modern evening is the freedom that comes from having many choices, many channels, many possibilities. I would not want to give that back. But I want to notice what we traded for it. We traded a certain kind of collective rest, a certain kind of shared rhythm, a certain kind of unspoken agreement that, at 10:30 or 11 on a weeknight, most people were going through more or less the same motions, in more or less the same order, on more or less the same timetable, and that there was something quietly reassuring about that. Whatever else was wrong with the world, the neighbourhood was asleep. Whatever else was uncertain, the country was for these few hours at rest. That kind of collective rest, the rest that comes from shared rhythm rather than individual scheduling, is a thing that has largely vanished. I do not know if we can get it back. I'm not sure we should try, but I think it is worth understanding that it was there, and that we let it go, and that some part of the loneliness of modern evenings comes from the fact that we are now each in our own evening, separately on our own clocks in our own rooms, doing our own things, while the rest of the country does its own things on its own clocks in its own rooms. The synchronized evening had its losses. So does the fragmented one. The trade was real, and the cost is real, and it is worth at least noticing the cost, even if we have decided collectively that the benefits were worth it. The streetlight on the corner hums faintly. A moth circles it and then flies away. The leaves continue to fall. The fall is coming on. The neighbours will be putting up storm windows soon. The children will be going back to school, the older ones already, the younger ones soon enough. The Christmas decorations are still in their boxes in the attics. The wreaths are still in their bags. The trees are still in the lots, waiting to be cut down in November and December and dragged into front rooms across the country. The year is moving forward. The decade is moving forward. The television sets are multiplying in the windows of the appliance stores. The fragmented evening is on its way. But tonight, for now, the neighbourhood is asleep, and the synchronized evening is still in place, and the hour we have just walked through is still the way most American families are spending most of their nights. Before I take you back inside the house for one last visit, I want to spend some more time inside this evening with you. I want to slow down further. I want to walk you through some of the rooms we have not yet entered. The basement workshop, more deeply this time, the attic, the back porch, the garage. And I want to take you also into the radio itself, into the programs that have been playing in the background of everything we have so far described, because the radio is, in a real sense, the third presence in this front room, alongside the husband and the wife. And to understand the texture of the evening we have just walked through, we have to understand what was coming out of that speaker. Let us begin with the programs. The radio dial in 1950 was a remarkable thing. 60 to 80 stations available depending on where you lived, broadcasting on AM, the FM band still in its infancy, and largely empty of commercial content. The major networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, and the Mutual Broadcasting System, carried the programs that everyone in the country knew by name. The evening lineup was a structured thing, repeated week to week, the same shows on the same nights at the same hours for years on end. If it was Sunday night, it was Jack Benny at 7. If it was Tuesday, it was Bob Hope at 9. If it was Wednesday, the Lux Radio Theatre at 9. The audience knew the schedule the way they knew their own work schedules. A radio program that had been on for 15 years was not a program. It was a habit. It was a piece of furniture. It was a member of the household. Jack Benny is the program that I find myself thinking about most when I picture this front room. The Jack Benny program began in 1932 and ran on radio until 1955. 23 years on the air. The same characters, the same running jokes, Benny's eternal 39 years of age, his legendary cheapness, his relationship with his vault, the slow burn, the pause that became, over the years, his signature comedic device. Benny would be asked a question and would simply not answer for several beats, and the audience, knowing him, would laugh harder during the silence than they would have laughed at any answer he could have given. That kind of comedy is hard to imagine now. It depends on a kind of intimacy with the performer that modern entertainment, with its constant churn of new faces and new shows, has largely made impossible. The radio audience in the 1950s knew Jack Benny the way they knew their own uncle. They had been listening to him every week for half their lives. The jokes were not jokes. The jokes were family. The husband in this front room has been listening to Jack Benny since he was a teenager. The wife has been listening since she was a child. The programme comes on at 7 on Sunday nights. They eat dinner with it on. They wash the dishes with it on. They sit in the front room afterward and listen to the last half hour of the show. The children, when they were younger, used to listen too before bedtime was moved earlier. The whole country, on Sunday nights at 7, is in their front rooms listening to Jack Benny. The collective audience for the programme at its peak was in the neighbourhood of 40 million people, out of a country of 150 million. More than a quarter of the country, every Sunday night, in the same hour listening to the same voice. I find myself sitting with the strangeness of that. A quarter of the country every Sunday night, hearing the same words at the same moment. The shared cultural reference points of the radio era were vast in a way that the fragmented entertainment landscape of the present makes difficult to imagine. If you wanted to discuss something on Monday morning at work, you could discuss what had happened on Jack Benny the night before, and you could be reasonably certain that the man you were discussing it with had also heard it. The water cooler conversation of the radio era was a real thing, and it had real weight. It bound the country together in ways that, when they were lost almost without anyone noticing. Fibber McGee and Molly is the other program I want to mention specifically, because it has a particular sound that I want you to be able to hear in your mind. The show was set in the home of a married couple, Fibber and Molly, who lived at 79 Wistful Vista in an unnamed Midwestern town. Each episode was structured around their kitchen, their parlour, their relationships with the neighbours who would come knocking on their door. The show had a famous running gag, Fibber's hall closet. At some point in nearly every episode, Fibber would open the closet door, and the entire contents of the closet would come crashing down on him, a long, elaborate cascade of sound effects, lasting 15, 20, sometimes 30 seconds, with one final small object, a bell, a spring, something with a tiny sound, falling at the very end after a long pause. The audience laughed harder at the last small sound than at the whole crash that preceded it. The running gag ran for nearly 20 years. The audience never got tired of it. They waited for the closet. They knew it was coming. The anticipation was part of the joy. The husband in this front room loves Fibber McGee and Molly. He listens to it every week. The closet gag never fails to make him laugh. His wife sometimes laughs with him, and sometimes is in the kitchen doing something else, and just hears him laughing from the front room. The sound of her husband laughing at the radio is one of the small, steady comforts of her life. He laughs the same way every time. A short bark of a laugh, then a longer chuckle, then a settling down. She knows the rhythm of his laughter the way she knows the creaks of the floorboards. She can tell from another room what part of the show is on by the kind of laugh he's producing. The Lux Radio Theatre is the third program I want to mention, because it represents something else. The Lux Radio Theatre was a 1-hour weekly drama that adapted popular Hollywood films for radio. The same stars who had appeared in the movies would, more often than not, come into the radio studio and perform abbreviated versions of their film roles for the radio audience. Clark Gable doing scenes from Gone with the Wind, Humphrey Bogart doing Casablanca, Ingrid Bergman, Bette Davis, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Joan Crawford. They all appeared on the Lux Radio Theatre at one point or another. The programme ran from 1934 to 1955, 21 years. The audience treated it as a kind of weekly night at the movies, brought to them in their own front rooms. They did not have to go anywhere. They did not have to pay for a ticket. The biggest stars in Hollywood came to them, through the speaker of the console radio, every Monday night at 9. There is something I want to point out about this. The film stars who appeared on the Lux Radio Theatre were paid for their appearances. The pay was very good. But what is interesting to me is that they appeared at all. The idea that the biggest film star in the country would spend an evening in a radio studio reading lines for an audience that could not see them is not an idea that translates well into the present. Modern movie stars do not generally appear on radio dramas. There are no radio dramas to appear on. The whole form, the form that brought Clark Gable into the front rooms of 1947 America on a Monday night, has more or less disappeared. The economic structure that supported it has disappeared. The audience that wanted it has disappeared. The form was so completely tied to its moment that, when the moment ended, the form ended with it. The Lux Radio Theatre went off the air in 1955, the same year that the Jack Benny programme ended its radio run, the same year that, more or less, the great age of radio drama in America came to its close. By 1955, the television had taken over the evening. The radio programmes had migrated where they could to television, but most of them had lost something in the transition. The Jack Benny programme continued on television, but it was not the same show. The silences did not land the same way. The slow burn did not work the same way. The intimacy of the audience with the performer was different when the audience could see his face. Some shows made the transition successfully, many did not. The ones that did not were left behind, and the radio dial by 1958 or 59 was filling up instead with music programming, and the great age of radio drama was over. The husband in the front room of the house we have been sitting in does not yet know this. It is 1950. The radio is on. Fibber McGee has just opened the closet. He is laughing. His wife is mending a sock. The clock is ticking on the mantel. The country is together in the way that only the radio era ever made the country together, and the breaking apart has not yet begun. I want to take you down to the basement now. We have been there briefly already, but I want to spend more time. The basement of a 1950s American home is a different kind of room than the basement of an older home, and a different kind of room than the basement of a newer home, and the differences are worth noticing. The basement is unfinished. The walls are bare concrete, painted grey. The floor is concrete, also painted grey, the paint wearing thin in the places where feet most often pass. There are no rugs. There is no drywall. The ceiling is exposed joists with the pipes and ducts visible above. A single bare bulb hangs from a fixture at the bottom of the stairs and another at the far end of the basement near the furnace. The light from these bulbs is harsh and yellow and casts long sharp shadows against the concrete walls. The furnace is a large iron presence in the corner. It was originally a coal furnace, installed when the house was built in 1947. 2 years ago, the husband paid to have it converted to natural gas. The conversion involved replacing the burner mechanism and adding a gas line. The conversion was expensive, about $300, which was a significant sum in 1948, but the husband considered it worth it, because the coal furnace had required someone to shovel coal into it every morning during the heating months, and the gas furnace runs on its own. The coal bin in the corner of the basement is still there. It has been swept out but not removed. The husband has been meaning to remove it for 2 years. He has not gotten to it. He will, eventually, or he will not. The coal bin will probably still be there when the family moves out in 1967. The washing machine sits against another wall. It is a wringer washer, a large round tub with an agitator in the middle, and 2 rubber rollers on top through which the clothes are passed to squeeze out the water before they are hung to dry. The wife does the laundry on Monday mornings, every Monday morning, with a regularity that has not varied since she got married. The Monday laundry is a fixture of her week, the way Sunday church is a fixture of her week. The whites first, then the colours, then the darks. The water is heated in the basement utility sink and ladled into the washer. The agitator runs for 10 or 12 minutes. The clothes are lifted out with wooden tongs, fed through the wringers, and dropped into a basket. Then the rinse water is poured in, the agitator runs again, the wringers run again, and the basket is carried up the stairs to the backyard to be hung on the clothesline. In bad weather, the laundry is hung in the basement on the lines strung between the joists. The whole process takes most of Monday morning. By the time the laundry is on the line, it is 11 or 11:30. The wife eats her lunch. She rests for 15 minutes. Then she begins the ironing. I want to spend a moment on the ironing, because the ironing is the part of the week that, in 1950, most defined the experience of being a housewife. The ironing was endless. Every shirt the husband owned had to be ironed. Every dress the daughters owned had to be ironed. The pillowcases had to be ironed. The sheets had to be ironed. The handkerchiefs had to be ironed. The kitchen towels had to be ironed. The aprons had to be ironed. A typical week of laundry produced somewhere between 20 and 30 items that required ironing, and the ironing was done with a metal iron heated on the stove, or, in this house since 1948, an electric iron with a thermostat. The wife sets up her ironing board in the kitchen on Monday afternoons and irons for 2, sometimes 3 hours. The radio is on while she irons. The smell of starch and steam fills the kitchen. Her arm is tired by the end of it. I'm not proposing we go back to that. The ironing alone is a sufficient argument against any nostalgia for the 1950s housewife's actual workload. The wife in this house has, on a typical Monday, worked more hours by mid-afternoon than her granddaughter, in 1990, will work all day at an office job. The labour of the post-war household, even with the new appliances, was relentless and physical, and largely invisible to the husband who came home at 6 expecting his supper to be ready. The hour we have walked through together, the slow, quiet hour of mending and reading, is the hour that comes after this woman has been working since 5:30 in the morning. The slowness of the evening is not the slowness of an unfilled life. It is the earned slowness of a life that has, since dawn, been filled with more work than I can adequately describe. The husband's workbench is at the other end of the basement, a simple wooden bench 8 feet long with a vice mounted at one end. A pegboard above it holds his tools, a claw hammer, a ball-peen hammer, a small sledgehammer, 2 screwdrivers, flathead, 1 screwdriver, Phillips head, a handsaw, a coping saw, a hacksaw, a level, a square, a tri-square, a chalk line, a plumb bob, 3 planes of different sizes, a draw knife, a spoke shave, a drawer plate, 2 chisels, a mallet, a brace and bit with a small wooden box of bits beside it, an auger, a file, a rasp, a set of pliers, a set of needle nose pliers, a pair of tin snips, a wire stripper, a pair of wire cutters, a coil of wire, a box of nails of various sizes, a box of screws, a box of nuts and bolts, a jar of washers, a jar of straightened nails, a coffee can of bent nails not yet straightened. The collection of tools on this wall represents the assumption that a man should be able to fix anything that breaks in his house: the plumbing, the wiring, the carpentry, the roof, the fence, the car to some extent, the lawnmower, the bicycle, the toys, the screen door, the leaky faucet, the cracked window, the loose tile, the squeaking hinge, the sticking drawer, the wobbly chair, the torn weather stripping. The man of the house in 1950 was expected to fix all of these things, and most men did, and the tools to do it were on a pegboard in the basement, and the men learned how to use them from their fathers and from the back pages of Popular Mechanics and from the neighbour 2 doors down who had been a carpenter before the war. I find myself genuinely admiring this. Not the gender expectation, I want to be careful about that. The assumption that the husband would fix everything, and the wife would not learn to fix anything, was a constraint of its own kind, and it is not a constraint we should miss. But the underlying competence, the assumption that a person could fix the things that broke in their own house, the relationship with the physical objects of daily life, that I do miss. The household of 1950 did not, by and large, throw things away when they broke, it fixed them. The tools on this pegboard are the tools of fixing. They are also, in a small way, the tools of a different relationship with the world. The husband does not come down to the basement most evenings. The mending takes place in the front room. The fixing takes place on weekends, mostly Saturdays. He has a list. The list is in his head mostly, but sometimes on a piece of paper in his shirt pocket. The screen door needs a new spring. The faucet in the bathroom drips. The hinges on the back gate are loose. He works his way through the list on Saturday mornings. Sometimes he finishes the list. More often, he finishes about half of it, and a new list begins forming for the next Saturday. The list never ends. The house generates new small problems faster than he can solve the old ones. This is the nature of owning a house. It is the nature of marriage. It is the nature of having children. The small problems multiply. The hands that fix them keep moving. Beside the workbench is a small wooden cabinet, also built by the husband in 1948, with materials he scavenged from a neighbour's garage demolition. The cabinet has small drawers, 12 of them, and each drawer is labelled in his careful handwriting. Roofing nails, finishing nails, drywall screws, wood screws, machine screws, bolts, washers, brads, tacks, staples, hooks, eyes. The cabinet is a small monument to a particular kind of order. It is the kind of order that comes from a man who learned, in the Pacific, what it meant to need a thing and not have it. He has never wanted to be in that position again. The cabinet is the answer. Whatever small thing he might need, he will have it, in the right drawer, labelled, ready. The basement also contains the family's storage, boxes of Christmas decorations against one wall, boxes of summer clothes stored for the winter, the girl's old baby clothes in a single trunk, a box of the husband's wartime uniforms, which his wife asked him several times if he wanted to donate or throw away, and which he never did. They are still in the box. He has not opened the box in 5 years. He does not know exactly what is in it. He knows that it is his Marine Corps issue, that there is at least one set of dress blues, and that there are some photographs and some letters. He has not wanted to look at them. He has not wanted to throw them away. The box sits in the corner of the basement, and the question of what to do with it remains, year after year, unresolved. There is a particular kind of unresolved object in many basements and attics of the early 1950s, the wartime souvenirs, the uniforms, the letters home, the photographs of men who did not come home, the medals in their small velvet boxes, the folded flags from the graves of brothers and fathers. These objects exist in a kind of suspended state. They are too important to throw away. They are too painful to look at. They sit in boxes, in basements and attics across the country, year after year, decade after decade, waiting for some resolution that never quite comes. The widow of a man who died at Anzio in 1944 still has his uniform in a box in her closet in 1974, 30 years later. The mother of a Marine who died at Iwo Jima still has the folded flag in her cedar chest in 1980. The country is full of these small unresolved monuments. They are part of the texture of post-war American domestic life, even when no one in the house talks about them. The basement of this house contains one such box. It will continue to contain it until the husband dies in 1972, and his wife, finally, with her daughter beside her, opens the box and looks at what is inside and decides what to do with it. But that is 22 years from now. Tonight in 1950 the box is still closed, and the husband is upstairs in his armchair, and the war is something he does not talk about, and the basement holds the small unspoken weight of what he carried home with him and has not yet been able to put down. Have you ever sat up all night with someone you loved who was sick? It is a particular kind of vigil, and I want to mention it because I think it is the kind of intimate hour that, like so much of what we have been discussing, has changed in character over the decades. In 1950, when a member of a family was sick, a fever, a flu, a child with the measles or the chicken pox or the croup, the care was almost entirely domestic. The doctor came to the house, often, and that was a remarkable thing in itself that I want to spend a moment with. House calls were standard. A general practitioner in a 1950s neighbourhood would visit 5, 6, sometimes 10 patients a day in their homes. He carried a black leather bag with his stethoscope, his blood pressure cuff, his thermometer, his small bottles of basic medications. He would sit on the edge of the patient's bed. He would talk with the family. He would prescribe something simple, aspirin, rest, fluids, a particular tea. He would come back in a day or two to check. He charged perhaps $5 for the visit. The whole experience of being sick in a 1950s American home was domestic in a way that the experience of being sick now, with its hospital trips and emergency rooms and specialists, is not. When a child was sick, the mother sat up with the child. The bedroom was rearranged so the child was in the room nearest the kitchen, where she could check on them easily. A pot of water was kept on the stove simmering to keep humidity in the air. A vaporizer might be set up in the corner of the room. Vicks Vapo Rub was applied to the child's chest, the smell of menthol filling the small bedroom. The mother sat in a chair beside the bed for hours, sometimes through the night. She read to the child. She wiped their forehead with a cool cloth. She held their hand. She listened to their breathing. She watched for the fever to break. I'm not romanticizing this. Children died of illnesses in 1950 that they would not die of in 1990. The antibiotic era was just beginning. Penicillin was widely available, but many infections that we now treat routinely were still serious threats. The mother sitting up with a sick child in 1950 was not sitting up for the same reasons her granddaughter would sit up with a sick child in 1990. She was sitting up because she could not be sure, because the night might turn, because the doctor would not come again until morning, because in many ways the child's survival depended on her being there, watching, ready to respond. There is something about that vigil that I want to put words to because I think it is one of the things that has most changed in the texture of family life. The hours of close care that, in 1950, were a routine part of being a mother. The hours sitting beside a sick bed, the hours bathing a feverish child, the hours simply present in case something happened. These hours have been redistributed in the modern household. Some of them have gone to the medical system. Some of them have gone to childcare workers. Some of them have simply been compressed into less time, with the assumption that medical interventions will cover what mother's presence used to provide. The mother of 1950 was a kind of frontline medical attendant in addition to everything else she was. She had to be. The world did not yet have the safety net that would make that role unnecessary. The wife in this house has sat up many nights with her children. 2 episodes of measles, one for each daughter, a serious flu the older one had last winter that the doctor was genuinely worried about, a bout of chicken pox that took 10 days to run its course, a bad cough the younger one had 2 months ago. The wife has been the night nurse for all of these illnesses. She knows the rhythm of a fever, the slow rise through the afternoon, the peak in the late evening, the long terrible plateau through the small hours, and then, if the fever is going to break, the sudden sweat at 3 or 4 in the morning that means the body has won. She has watched these rhythms in her children. She has held cool cloths to their foreheads. She has changed sheets at 2 in the morning. She has rocked feverish children in her arms and sung to them softly, because there was nothing else she could do. She has watched the dawn come up through the bedroom window with a sleeping child finally cool on her lap. These are the hours that the official history of the 1950s housewife does not generally include. The cookbooks do not mention them. The advertisements do not show them. The popular culture, then and now, prefers to show the smiling woman in the pearl serving the pot roast. The smiling woman in the pearls is real, but she's only one of the many women in any given mother in the 1950s. The other women, the laundry woman, the cleaning woman, the ironing woman, the cooking woman, the nursing woman, the listening woman, the comforting woman, the night vigil woman, all of these are present in the same body, doing different things in different hours, none of them photographed, none of them romanticized, but all of them carrying the actual weight of what it meant to make a household function. The husband, when he comes home at 6, sees the pot roast. He does not see the laundry from this morning, the ironing from this afternoon, the small repairs that have been managed, the children who have been bathed and fed and helped with their homework. He sees the pot roast. He says it smells good. He sits down. He eats. He goes into the front room. He reads the paper. The work that produced the pot roast and the rest of the day is invisible to him, not because he does not love his wife. He does deeply. But because that work is structured to be invisible. The 1950s household was an enormous engine of unseen labour, and the wife was the engine. I want to ask you something gently, because I think it is worth asking. What do you know about the unseen labour in the household you grew up in? The grocery shopping, the meal planning, the remembering of birthdays, the keeping of medical appointments, the matching of socks, the replacing of light bulbs, the sending of thank you cards, the 1,000 small acts of management that keep a household running. In 1950, almost all of this was done by one person, and that person was almost always the wife. The fact that this was the case is one of the central facts about the era, and we cannot fully understand the slow, quiet hour we have been walking through unless we understand that it was the only hour in the wife's day that was, in any sense, free. The basement is quiet. The furnace cycles on. Warm air rises through the ducts. The washing machine is still. The workbench is still. The boxes of stored things sit in their corners. The unresolved box of wartime uniforms sits in its corner. The basement is the room of stored things and stored selves, of the work that gets done in other hours and the things that get carried that cannot be set down. It is also, in its own way, a quiet room. The basement is part of the texture of the evening, even if no one is in it. Let me take you up to the attic next. The attic of this house is reached by a pull-down ladder from the upstairs hallway. The husband installed the ladder himself in 1949. Before that, the attic was reached only by a folding wooden stepladder placed under a hatch in the ceiling. The pull-down is an improvement. The attic itself is unfinished. Bare rafters, bare insulation, a small window at each end, a wooden floor laid only over the central beam, with the rest of the attic accessible only by careful stepping on the joists. To either side of the central floor the insulation lies thick between the joists, and to step on the insulation is to put a foot through the ceiling of the room below. The wife has done this once in 1947, retrieving a box of Christmas decorations. The foot went through the dining nook ceiling. The husband patched the plaster. The patch is still visible if you know where to look. The attic stores what the basement does not have room for. Boxes labelled in marker. Photo albums in a small fireproof box. The girls' baby furniture, broken down. The crib, the changing table, the high chair, all wrapped in old sheets, all waiting in case there is another baby, which there will not be. The wife had a difficult time with the younger daughter's birth, and the doctor advised her there would be no more children. She has accepted this. She has not entirely accepted this. The crib in the attic is part of the not entirely accepting. She has not been able to ask her husband to dispose of it. He has not asked. The crib sits in the attic year after year, the way the uniform box sits in the basement. Some things in a house are not so much stored as suspended. The Christmas decorations are in 3 boxes. The ornaments, the lights, the tinsel and the garlands. The wreath is in a separate flat box. The tree stand is in another box. The Christmas tree itself, when there is one, comes from a lot down on Main Street in early December. is cut down the day it is brought home, and is gone again by the 2nd of January, dragged out to the curb where the trash service takes it. The decorations come down from the attic the first weekend of December. They go back up on a Sunday afternoon in early January. The whole cycle of bringing them down and putting them back up is one of the small rituals of the year. The wife does most of this work. The husband helps with the heavy lifting. The girls help with the decorating itself. There are also old letters in the attic. A small wooden box containing letters from the husband to his wife when they were courting, in 1943 and 1944, when he was overseas and she was home. The letters are in chronological order, tied with a faded ribbon. There are perhaps 30 of them. They are not numerous, because the censors slowed down delivery, and many of his letters did not arrive at all, and because the writing of letters from a Pacific island in the middle of the war was itself a difficult thing to manage with the equipment and time available. The 30 letters that did arrive, she kept. She has not read them in a long time. She does not need to read them. She remembers their general content. The handwriting on the envelopes is enough. The thin paper, the V-mail format that compressed letters into miniature reproductions to save shipping weight, the censor's stamp. The letters in this box are, in a real sense, the document of how she and her husband became married. They were engaged before he shipped out. They were not yet sure they would survive the engagement. The letters were the way they kept the engagement alive. The letters became, after the war, the way they remembered each other from those years apart. They will be the way she remembers him after he dies, for the years she spends as his widow. The letters are the most important objects in this house, and they are in a small wooden box in the attic, under a stack of old curtains, and no one looks at them more than once or twice a decade. I find that quietly beautiful. The most important things in a house are not always the things on display. The framed photographs in the front room are visible. The wedding photograph in the bedroom is visible. The Christmas decorations come out once a year. The letters in the attic come out only when the wife needs to remember something specific, and she does not need to remember most of what they contain, because she lives with the consequences of what they contain every day. The attic is quiet at this hour. The bats that sometimes get in through small gaps in the soffit are not in tonight. The squirrels that occasionally nest in the eaves are not active. The insulation absorbs sound. The small window at each end of the attic shows the dark sky beyond. The attic is the highest room in the house, and from inside it you can sometimes hear the rain on the roof more clearly than from any other room. It is not raining tonight. The night is clear. The fall is coming on, but the rain has not yet started. Let me bring you back downstairs now, the back porch, which we have not yet visited. The back porch is enclosed. 3 walls, a roof, a screen door at the back leading down to the yard. The walls have windows that can be opened or closed depending on the season. Right now, in early fall, 2 of the windows are open. The screen door at the back is closed but unlocked. The porch contains a small wicker table, 2 wicker chairs, a metal patio chair and a glider, a 2-seat bench that rocks gently back and forth on a frame. The glider has been in this family since before the wedding. It belonged to the husband's parents originally, given to the young couple when they bought the house in 1947. The smell of the porch is different from the smell of any other room in the house. The wicker furniture has a particular dry, grassy smell. The wooden floor of the porch has its own slightly different smell from the wooden floors inside. The air on the porch in early fall has the smell of the leaves outside, the small, wet smell of grass, the faint scent of the late roses still blooming against the fence at the back of the yard. The husband has a small flower bed in the backyard that he tends on weekends. Roses and chrysanthemums in the fall, peonies and dahlias in the summer, tulips and daffodils in the spring. He is not a serious gardener. He puts in perhaps 3 hours a week, but the bed is his, and the bed is one of the small ways he has of being present in his own house, in a way that does not require him to talk. The porch is where the family sits on summer evenings after dinner. The radio comes out to the porch on a small extension cord. The husband ran the cord himself, a permanent installation, in 1949. The family sits on the porch in the summer until it is dark, sometimes later. The children play on the lawn. The neighbours call across the fence. The smell of the neighbours' cooking comes through the screen. The Andersons' barbecue, the Brennans' meatloaf, the Petersons' fried chicken on Sundays. The summer evening on the back porch is one of the high points of the year. The wife, in the depths of February, will sometimes close her eyes and remember a particular evening from the previous July, and the memory will be sharp enough to almost feel. Tonight, in early fall, the porch is empty. The family's inside. The porch is cooler than the front room, and the light from inside the kitchen spills out through the kitchen window onto the wicker furniture, and the furniture casts long shadows toward the screen door. A moth flies against the screen from outside. The screen ripples slightly when the moth hits it. The moth tries again. After a while, the moth gives up and flies away toward the streetlight. The garage is at the end of the driveway, detached from the house, a single-car garage built at the same time as the house. The garage holds the husband's car, a 1947 Plymouth, bought used in 1949 for $950. The car is dark green. It has manual transmission. It has an AM radio. It has windshield wipers that the husband replaced last spring. It has tyres that he is going to need to replace next spring. The car is parked nose in. The doors of the garage are closed and locked. The car will not be needed until tomorrow morning at 7:30, when the husband will leave for work. His work is at an insurance company in the city, 20 minutes away by car. He started at the company in 1946, 3 months after his discharge. He has been promoted twice. He is now a claims adjuster, supervising a small team. His salary is $6,200 a year, which is enough for the house and the car and the household, and a small savings account that he and his wife have been building for the girls' college. Although they are not sure yet that the girls will go to college, and the savings account may, in the end, be for something else. The savings account is at the local bank, where the manager knows them both by name and waves at them when they come in to deposit the weekly check. I want to take a long look at the savings account, because the savings account in 1950 is a different kind of thing than what we now mean by that phrase. It is in a passbook account at a local bank. The passbook is a small booklet, perhaps 4 inches by 6, with a leather cover, and inside it are columns where the deposits and withdrawals are recorded in the bank teller's handwriting. The teller writes in the date, the amount, and the running balance. The passbook is updated every time the husband or wife comes into the bank. The household keeps track of its own savings by looking at the passbook. There is no online banking. There are no statements mailed at the end of the month. There is the passbook in the small wooden box on the dresser in the master bedroom, with a running record of every deposit and withdrawal the family has made since 1947. The balance as of this evening is $1,427. This is what the family has in the world, beyond the house and the car and the contents of the house and the car. $1,427, roughly 2.5 months of the husband's salary. In 1950, this is considered a reasonable savings cushion for a family of 4. It is enough to cover a major car repair, or a roof patch, or an unexpected medical bill. It is not enough to cover a long period of unemployment, but the husband has not been unemployed since 1946, and the company he works for has not had layoffs in his time, and the economy is generally good, and so the small cushion feels adequate. I find myself thinking about the difference between this savings account and the savings account of a similar family in 1990, or 2010, or right now. The amounts are different. The instruments are different. The expectations are different. The 1950s family had less money in many absolute terms, but they also had fewer things to spend money on. There were no monthly subscription services. There were no cell phone bills. There was no internet. The household bills came in the mail and were paid by check or in person. The number of fixed expenses was small. The cost of food was low relative to income. The cost of housing, having been locked in by the original mortgage, was low. The cost of healthcare was low and largely covered by employer insurance, which had become a standard benefit in the post-war years. The family lived inside a relatively small economy. The $1,427 in the passbook felt like a fortune, and in some ways it was. This is part of the texture of the slow evening we have been walking through. The slowness is partly the slowness of a household that has, by the end of the day, satisfied its small material needs. There is nothing more to buy. The grocery shopping was done on Saturday. The next paycheck will not come until Friday. The savings account is at the bank, and the passbook is in the wooden box, and the household has, for the moment, no urgent financial business. The evening is not interrupted by financial transactions because there are no financial transactions to be made. The economy of the household is at rest. I want to spend some more time inside the radio programs that have been playing throughout this evening. Not the famous shows this time, the smaller shows, the local shows, the shows that have not been preserved and that the modern historian can only piece together from fragmentary records. The local radio station, every town had one, broadcast the local news at 5:30 and again at 10. The local news consisted of a single announcer reading the news from the day's wire services and the local police blotter, a traffic accident on Route 9, a barn fire in the next county, a robbery at the Five and Dime on Main Street with the suspect still at large. The local news lasted 15 minutes. It was followed by the local weather forecast, also read by the same announcer. Tomorrow's weather, the 5-day outlook, the temperature for the past 24 hours, the expected high, the expected low. The percentage chance of precipitation, although in 1950 the forecasts were considerably less reliable than they would later become, and the announcer would often hedge with phrases like, possibly some rain late tomorrow afternoon, or chance of frost overnight in some areas. The forecasts were taken as suggestions rather than predictions. The family looked at the sky in the morning to decide what to wear and what to plan for. After the local news and weather, the station might run a short program of agricultural reports. For the rural listeners who still made up a meaningful percentage of the local audience, hog prices in Chicago, wheat prices in Kansas City, cattle futures. The market reports lasted 10 minutes. The family in this house does not particularly need the market reports. They are not farmers. But the reports come on automatically, and sometimes the husband listens because he grew up on a farm, and the prices of corn and wheat and hogs are part of the texture of his childhood, and hearing them on the radio is a kind of small comfort, even though he has not lived on a farm since he was 19 years old. After the agricultural reports, the station would switch to the network programming, the Lux Radio Theatre, or the Jack Benny program, or whatever was scheduled for that night. The local station was a kind of joint, connecting the small local rhythms of the town to the larger national rhythms of the network. The combination produced an interesting kind of radio dial, local and national, intimate and broad, the news of the next street and the news of the world in alternating segments throughout the day. The radio is also where music came from, not all music. Records existed, and many families had record players. The phonograph in the front room of this house is a small console model, a turntable in a wooden cabinet that the family bought in 1948. It plays 78 RPM records. It does not yet play the new 33 1/3 long-playing records, which were introduced in 1948, but are not yet standard in most homes. The family has perhaps 2078 RPM records, some big band recordings, a few Frank Sinatra, a couple of Bing Crosby, a Glenn Miller, a handful of children's records that the girls play in the daytime. But the bulk of the family's music listening happens through the radio. The radio brought music into the household constantly, the big band programs in the evening, the hit parades on Saturday night, the morning music programs that the wife listened to while she worked in the kitchen. The afternoon programs aimed at the housewife, the children's programs at 4 o'clock when the older daughter came home from school. Music was the constant background of the household, and it was, almost always, music that everyone in the country was hearing more or less at the same time. The hit songs of 1950, Goodnight Irene, by the Weavers and Gordon Jenkins, Mona Lisa, by Nat King Cole, the Tennessee Waltz, by Patti Page. These were not songs that one or two people in the country knew. They were songs that nearly everyone knew. The grocer hummed them at the cash register. The barber whistled them while cutting hair. The wife sang them softly while ironing. The husband heard them on the car radio driving to work. They were the shared soundtrack of the country, and they were carried almost entirely by the radio. I want you to imagine for a moment what it would feel like to share a soundtrack with the rest of the country. Not a personal playlist, not a curated set of songs reflecting your particular taste, a genuine shared soundtrack. The same 40 or 50 songs that everyone else, more or less, was also hearing in their kitchens and their cars and their grocery stores. There is something about that experience that I think we have entirely lost. The fragmentation of taste, which began with the spread of long-playing records and accelerated through every subsequent technology, has produced a world in which the music in your headphones is almost certainly not the music in mine. We do not share songs anymore the way the country shared songs in 1950. The hit parade is not really the hit parade anymore. The unified pop music landscape, like the unified evening, is gone, and we are each, in our own way, listening alone. The wife in this front room can sing every word of Goodnight Irene. So can her husband. So can every adult on the block. So can every cashier at the A&P, every mailman, every milkman, every teacher at the elementary school, every barber and beautician in the town. When the song comes on the radio, every adult within earshot can sing along. The song is, in 1950, almost a kind of national possession. It belongs to the country in a way that no single song in 2024 belongs to the country. We do not have those songs anymore. We have 1,000 songs and 10,000 songs, and no one of them is the song. Have you ever sung along with a stranger to a song you both knew without having planned to? It is one of the small remaining experiences of the unified soundtrack. You hear it sometimes in a bar when a particular song comes on the jukebox and 3 or 4 people start singing along, and then more people join in, and for a moment a small room of strangers is doing the same thing at the same time, and the loneliness of the fragmented soundtrack briefly lifts. The 1950s American living room contained that experience almost constantly. The shared songs, the shared programs, the shared rhythms, the shared evening. The country was alone together in a way that has, by the present moment, almost entirely vanished. The clock on the mantel strikes the quarter hour. 9:45. The wife is asleep upstairs. The husband is asleep beside her. The children are asleep down the hall. The house is dark except for the streetlight outside, which casts a faint stripe of yellow across the front porch and through the front window into the front room, where it falls on the empty armchair and the empty mending basket and the empty floor lamp. The radio is off. The kitchen is dark. The dishes are drying. The world is held. I want to walk you through the neighbourhood now, not just this house, the neighbourhood, the houses up and down the street, because the texture of the evening we have been describing is not only the texture of one house, it is the texture of all the houses on the street, and that collective texture is part of what makes the evening what it is. The house next door to the right belongs to an older couple. Their children are grown. They are in their late 60s. The husband is retired from the post office. The wife was a teacher for 30 years and retired 3 years ago. They have lived in this house since 1934. They raised their children here. They have known 3 different neighbours in the house we have been visiting. Their evenings are quieter than the evening we have just walked through. They eat dinner at 5. They listen to the radio together until 8. They go to bed at 9. The lights in their house go off at 9:15. They sleep deeply. They wake at 5. The husband walks to the corner to pick up the paper. The wife makes coffee. The day begins. The house to the left belongs to a family with 3 children. 2 boys and a girl. The boys are 8 and 10. The girl is 4. The husband works at the steel mill on the edge of town. The wife is at home with the children. Their evenings are louder than the evenings in the house we have been visiting. The boys are old enough to roughhouse. The 4-year-old still cries sometimes at bedtime. The dinner table at this house is louder. The bath time is louder. The bedtime is louder. By 9, the children are finally all in bed, and the parents have an hour to themselves before they go up. They watch the radio together. The husband reads the paper. The wife knits. The pattern of their evening is similar to the pattern in the house next door, but with more noise on either side of it. The house across the street is the Andersons. They are the ones with the television. The first family on the block to get one. They got it last spring. A 12-inch screen in a wooden cabinet. The whole neighbourhood has been over to see it at one point or another. The Andersons have started hosting Friday night gatherings. The men come over to watch the boxing on television. The women bring food and sit in the kitchen. The children watch the early shows in the living room before the boxing comes on. The Friday night gatherings have been going for about 6 months now. They have become a small institution on the block. They will continue for another 1.5 years, until other families on the block start getting televisions of their own, at which point the gatherings will dissolve, naturally, as each family moves the entertainment centre into their own front room. The Andersons are, in a small way, the leading edge of the change that is coming. They do not know it. They are simply a couple with a television set, but the television set is changing them. Mr. Anderson reads less in the evenings now. Mrs. Anderson does less needlework. The radio in their front room has been moved to a corner and is rarely turned on. The television is on most evenings, from 6 until 10 or 11. The Andersons go to bed later than they used to. They sleep less deeply. They have begun to develop a particular kind of evening fatigue that they did not have before. A tiredness that is not the tiredness of work, but a tiredness of attention. The television, in the long run, will turn out to be tiring in a way that the radio was not. The Andersons are the first in the neighbourhood to discover this, though they would not yet describe it that way. The house next to the Andersons belongs to a young couple who just moved in this spring. The wife is the pregnant one we have already met, the one in the kitchen with the warm milk. Her husband is a few years older. He came back from the war in 1946. He met her at college. They got married in 1949. They bought this house with his GI Bill benefits. The pregnancy is their first. The husband is excited but anxious. The wife is sleeping poorly, partly because of the pregnancy, and partly because of a particular kind of restlessness that she has not been able to put words to. She will, in 3 years, have a son. The son will be drafted in 1967. The son will go to Vietnam in 1968. The son will come back from Vietnam in 1969. The shape of the son's life, 69. The shape of the son's life, which has not yet begun, has not yet even been conceived, is already, in some quiet sense, traced out by the larger pattern of the country. The wife in the kitchen, drinking warm milk in 1950, does not know any of this. She knows only that she cannot sleep, and that the milk sometimes helps, and that she will need to be up in a few hours regardless. The houses further down the block contain their own stories. The retired Methodist minister and his wife, the widow whose husband died of a heart attack in 1947, the salesman who travels 3 weeks out of every 4 and is rarely home, his wife and 3 daughters, who have built a complete domestic life that does not depend on his presence, the single woman who teaches at the elementary school and lives alone in a small house that was her parents' before they died, the young family from Italy who moved in last year and whose English is improving slowly, the older couple whose son did not come back from Korea. That war is just beginning, in the summer of 1950, and the older couple does not yet know what the next year will bring them, but it is coming. Each house contains its own small or large weight of history. Each evening in each house is its own small variation on the evening we have been describing. The dishes are washed in slightly different ways. The children are bathed in slightly different ways. The radio is on in some houses and off in others. The lights go out at slightly different times. But the broad shape of the evening is shared. The country is, more or less, going through the same motions, in the same order, on the same schedule. The unified evening holds. I want to pause on the unified evening for one more moment, because I think it is one of the most important things about this era, and one of the things that, in retrospect, is most difficult for the modern person to fully imagine. The unified evening was not just a matter of shared programs and shared songs, it was a matter of shared rhythm. The country went to bed at roughly the same time. The country woke up at roughly the same time. The country had dinner at roughly the same time. The country listened to the radio at roughly the same time. The country was, in a way that we have lost, on the same schedule. This had consequences for the texture of social life. The phone calls between friends happened at roughly the same hours every day, because friends knew when other friends would be home and when they would not. The mail came at roughly the same time every day, because the mail carrier walked the same route on the same schedule. The milk was delivered at the same hour every morning before dawn. The newspaper was delivered at the same hour every morning. The bread truck came on Tuesdays and Fridays. The dry cleaner picked up on Wednesdays. The world ran on schedules, and the schedules were known, and the knowing of the schedules made the world feel containable in a way that the modern, always-on world does not feel containable. I'm not arguing that this was better. I want to be careful about that. The unified schedule was, for some people, a kind of cage. The single woman down the street who teaches at the elementary school sometimes finds the unified rhythm of the neighbourhood oppressive. The young man on the block who is gay and has not been able to say so to anyone finds the unified rhythm suffocating. The widow who lost her husband 3 years ago finds the synchronized routine of the neighbourhood a daily reminder of what she has lost. The unified evening was not universally a comfort. For people who, for any of 1,000 reasons, did not fit into its rhythms, it could be a kind of slow torture. The freedom of the modern fragmented schedule, the freedom to be awake at 3 in the morning and to have a community of other people awake at 3 in the morning, has been a real liberation for people whose lives did not fit into the 1950 schedule. I want to acknowledge that. But the unified evening also had its gifts, the collective rest, the shared rhythm, the sense that the country was, for a few hours each night, breathing together. That gift, for the people for whom it was a gift, was real, and its loss is also real, and we are not wrong to notice that something has changed even if we have decided that the change, on balance, has been worth it. The clock on the mantel ticks, the streetlight hums, the leaves continue to fall, the neighbourhood is asleep. Now, before we return to the kitchen for the final image, I want to take you through a few more rooms of this evening. Not physical rooms, the rooms of memory and feeling and small interior life that exist inside the people we have been describing. The wife, the husband, the children, the neighbourhood, and the seasons of this same hour, because the hour we have been walking through is an autumn hour, and the same hour in summer and winter and spring has its own particular texture. And to know this house fully, you have to know what the last hour before bed feels like in each of the 4 seasons. Let me start with the children, because we have walked past their bedroom and not gone fully inside it. The 2 daughters. The older one is 7, the younger one is 4. They share a bedroom not because the house has no other room. It has a third small room at the back that could be a bedroom, but because the parents have decided that the girls should sleep in the same room until they are older. The third small room is the husband's study, of a sort, a desk, a chair, a bookshelf, a small filing cabinet for household papers. He uses it on Saturday afternoons to do the family's accounts. He pays the bills there. He writes letters there. The room smells of pipe tobacco, because he sometimes smokes a pipe while he works, and the smell has soaked into the wallpaper over the years. The older daughter is in the 2nd grade at the elementary school 4 blocks away. She walks to school in the morning with the 2 children from next door. She walks home in the afternoon by herself. She has a satchel with 2 textbooks, a notebook, a pencil case, and a small leather strap to hold it all together. She has a teacher she likes, Mrs. Davis, who is older and gentle and who has been at the elementary school for 30 years. She has a best friend named Margaret who lives 2 blocks away. She is learning long division, which she finds difficult. She's reading a book about a girl on a farm in the 19th century, which she finds wonderful. She has a particular nighttime ritual that I want to describe to you because I think it is one of the small lost things of childhood in this era. After her bath, after her teeth are brushed, after her nightgown is on, after her mother has tucked her in and kissed her forehead and turned off the overhead light, she stays awake for a little while. The night light is on. The hallway light spills in through the partially closed door. The room is dim. Her sister is already asleep in the other bed, breathing softly. The older daughter lies on her back with her hands folded across her chest, and she thinks. She thinks about what happened at school that day. She thinks about a girl in her class who was mean to Margaret at recess. She thinks about the long division problem she could not solve. She thinks about the dinner her mother made. She thinks about the story her father told at the table, about a man at his office who lost his hat in a strong wind. She thinks about the dress she wants to wear to school tomorrow. She thinks about her sister who is sleeping with her mouth slightly open. She thinks about her parents, downstairs in the front room, the radio playing softly, her mother mending socks, her father reading. She thinks about how, when she grows up, she will probably do the same thing. She will probably be in a front room with her own husband, mending socks of her own children, and the radio will be playing, and the world will be quiet, and that future feels both certain and somehow far away. She does not know that her future will not look like this. She does not know that by the time she is married in 1964, the television will be in the front room, and the radio will be in the basement, and the rhythm of evening will have changed. She does not know that by the time her own children are her age, in the 1970s, there will be colour television and microwave ovens, and the first home computers will be appearing in some neighbourhoods. She does not know that the world she will inherit will be radically different from the world her mother lives in, and that the small, steady rhythms she is taking for granted at age 7 will be, by the time she is 40, almost entirely gone. She thinks none of this. She thinks about long division. She thinks about the dress for tomorrow. She thinks about whether Margaret will save a seat for her at lunch. After a while, her thoughts become less ordered. The boundary between thought and dream blurs. She does not notice when she crosses it. She is asleep. The younger daughter, in the other bed, is already deep in sleep. She has fewer thoughts to keep her awake. She had a busy day. The bath made her warm. The nightgown is soft. The pillow is in the right shape. She is 4 years old, and at 4, sleep is something that happens to you the way weather happens to you. You do not choose it. You do not work for it. It simply arrives, and you are inside it before you knew it was coming. I want to spend a moment on the inner life of a small child in 1950, because it is a quiet thing that does not get much attention in the historical record, and it is one of the things I find myself most curious about. What did a 4-year-old think about lying in bed at the end of the day in 1950? She thought about her doll. She thought about the cat down the street that she likes to pet through the fence. She thought about the bath. She thought about her mother. She thought perhaps about the smell of the dinner her mother made, or about the song her older sister was humming, or about a game she played in the backyard that afternoon. Her thoughts were small and immediate and concrete. She did not yet have many abstractions. She did not yet have many anxieties about the future. The future, for a 4-year-old in 1950, extended about as far as breakfast tomorrow. Beyond that, the world was a kind of warm, soft blur. This is one of the things I think about when I think about childhood in this era. The world that a 4-year-old inhabited was small. The neighbourhood, the house, the yard, the grandmother's house if the grandmother lived nearby, the grocery store on Saturdays, the church on Sundays, the doctor's office when she was sick. That was nearly the entire geography of her life. She did not have other geographies coming in through screens. She did not know what a desert looked like, or a jungle, or a foreign city, except as imaginary places her mother read to her about from books. The world was small, and the smallness of the world was, in some way, the foundation of a particular kind of childhood security. The world she could see was the world. There was nothing pressing in from beyond the world she could see. The radio sometimes spoke of larger things, but the radio was a voice in another room, and the larger things were abstractions. The 4-year-old's world was as large as she could walk in an afternoon. Now I want to ask you something. Have you noticed, in the children you know, the way the modern world has expanded the geography of childhood? A small child now, at 4, has often seen pictures of dinosaurs and pictures of space, and pictures of foreign countries and pictures of every kind of animal and pictures of every kind of weather. The small child knows, in some abstract sense, that her world is one small piece of a very large world. The 1950s 4-year-old did not know this. The 1950s 4-year-old believed in some sense that her neighbourhood was the world. The expansion of childhood geography, the way the world comes flooding into a child's consciousness through screens and books and conversations, has done something to the texture of being a small child that no one really tracks. The 1950s 4-year-old, falling asleep in her bed in this small house, on this small block, is not aware of being a small thing in a large world. She's aware of being herself, in her bed, with her doll, near her sister, with her mother and father downstairs and the radio playing softly through the floorboards. There is a particular kind of safety in that. I am not saying it is better. The expansion of a child's world has its own gifts. A child in 2024 knows that there are different kinds of people in the world, different climates, different ways of living, different possibilities. The 1950s child did not know any of this in the same way, and her ignorance of the wider world was, in some ways, its own kind of limitation. But the smallness of the 1950s child's world produced a particular kind of inner security that has, I think, become harder to come by. The child who knows that her neighbourhood is the world sleeps differently from the child who knows that her neighbourhood is one of millions of neighbourhoods. She's asleep now. Both children are asleep. The bedroom is quiet. The hallway light glows softly through the partially open door. The night is settling. Let me take you back to the husband for a moment. He is in his chair in the front room, but his thoughts are not where his eyes are. He has been reading the same paragraph of his book for several minutes. The book is a biography of Ulysses S. Grant. He has been working through it slowly for 2 months. He likes Grant. He recognizes something in him, the quiet competence, the willingness to be underestimated, the way Grant carried what he had been through without making a public matter of it. The husband is in some way looking for instructions in Grant. He has not put this into words for himself. But the biographies of soldiers, which are the only kind of book he reads anymore, are the closest thing he has to a manual for what his life is supposed to look like now. He fought in the Pacific. He was 18 when he enlisted, in 1943. He was 20 when he came home in 1945. The 2 years between are years he does not often think about consciously. But the years are inside him. They are inside the way he eats his breakfast, the way he ties his tie, the way he sleeps, the way he sometimes wakes at 3 a.m. and lies very still in the dark, listening for sounds that are not there. He does not have what people would later call post-traumatic stress disorder. He does not have the language for it. The medical profession of 1950 does not have the language for it either. He has what people in his generation called nerves, or strain, or shell shock, words that were already starting to feel outdated. Mostly he has nothing that anyone would name. He has a particular kind of quietness. He has a particular way of being present in a room that is, in some way, also being absent. He has dreams he does not describe. He has friends he no longer has, men he served with, men whose deaths he saw, men whose names he does not say aloud anymore. His wife knows some of this. She does not know the specifics. She knows that her husband came back different than the boy she'd been engaged to in 1943. She knows that, in their early years of marriage, he sometimes shouted in his sleep, and she would wake him and hold him, and he would shake for a few minutes and then settle. The shouting in his sleep has gotten less frequent. He has not shouted in his sleep in over a year, but the shaking is still there sometimes, even without the shouting. He shakes when there is a thunderstorm. He shakes when a car backfires on the street outside. He shakes when one of the daughters drops a heavy book on the floor, and the sudden bang catches him by surprise. The shaking lasts only a few seconds. He hides it well, but his wife sees it. She has trained herself to see it without commenting on it. She knows that her husband does not want to be a man who shakes when a car backfires, and she protects him from having to acknowledge that he is. This is the texture of post-war American marriage that I have been most struck by, in the records and oral histories of the period. The unspoken understanding between the wife who knows and the husband who does not want to be known. The wives of 1950 were, in many cases, doing a kind of careful, constant emotional work that was never named. They were absorbing the weight of what their husbands had brought back from the war. They were arranging the household so that loud noises would be minimized. They were keeping the children from waking the husband when he had nightmares. They were lying gently when the husband asked whether he had shouted in his sleep. "No, dear, you slept fine," because the husband did not want to know, and the wife understood that the not knowing was a kind of mercy. I am not proposing this was a good arrangement. The price the wives paid was steep. The price the husbands paid was steeper. Many of these men did not live as long as they should have, because the things they carried, unnamed and untreated, eroded them from the inside in ways that the medicine of their era could not address. The husband in this front room will live to be 64. He will die of a heart attack in 1972. His widow, my way of saying his wife, the woman whose hand he is now holding in the dark, will say at his funeral that he never really fully came home from the war, and the people at the funeral will nod, because they will know what she means, even though no one has ever said it out loud before. But that is 22 years from now. Tonight he is in his chair, the book open in his lap, reading a paragraph about Grant for the 5th time without registering its content. His wife glances at him. She sees what he is doing. She does not say anything. She returns to her mending. She will, in a few minutes, suggest that perhaps it is time for bed. She will say it gently, not as a command, but as an invitation. He will close the book and stand up. He will smile at her. They will go upstairs together. The whole transaction will take less than a minute. It will look from the outside like a couple deciding to go to bed at the end of the evening. It will be, in fact, a small ongoing rescue performed by his wife, every night, without his quite knowing it. She's been doing this for 5 years. She will do it for another 22 years. She is, in a way that he will never fully appreciate, the reason he is able to have an ordinary life. She is the structure that holds him. Have you ever loved someone who carried something they could not put down? It is a particular kind of love. It is not the love of the romance novel. It is not the love that the popular culture of any era likes to depict. It is the love of careful daily attention. The love of arranging the kitchen so that the loud bang of the pot lid will not happen when he's in the room. The love of asking the children, quietly in the afternoon, to play their music a little softer because Daddy's reading. The love of waking in the night when he shakes beside you, and holding him without speaking and waiting until his breathing returns to normal, and then lying awake yourself for an hour while he sleeps again, listening to him breathe, listening for the change that means another bad dream is coming. That love is one of the great unwritten chapters of post-war American domestic life. The wives who provided it did so without being asked, without being thanked, often without even being noticed by the husbands they were saving. They did it because they had been told, by the larger culture, that this was what marriage was, and many of them, I think, also did it because they loved their husbands and could see what their husbands could not see in themselves, and the love was bigger than the absence of acknowledgement. I want to spend a longer moment on the wife, the woman whose hand is holding her husband's in the dark, the woman whose evening we have been walking through, her interior life, the things she thinks about that she does not say out loud. She is 27. She was born in 1923. She was 6 when the stock market crashed, 10 when Roosevelt was first elected, 16 when the war began in Europe, 18 when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Her teenage years took place inside the largest war in human history. Her young womanhood was lived in the shadow of that war. She met her husband in 1942 at a USO dance in her hometown. She danced with him. He was on leave from basic training. He was 18 and she was 19. They wrote letters for a year. He proposed by letter in 1943 before he shipped out to the Pacific. She accepted, also by letter. They were married in 1946, 3 months after his discharge. They have known each other for 8 years. They have been married for 4. They have 2 daughters. They have a house. They have a savings account. They have, by every external measure, achieved exactly what young women of her generation were told they were supposed to achieve. She is, by most days, happy. I want to be clear about that. The interior life I am about to describe is not the life of a woman who is unhappy. She loves her husband. She loves her daughters. She loves her house. She loves her work, even when the work is hard, because the work is the structure of her days and she is proud of how well she does it. She is, by most days, deeply content. And yet, there are moments, there are particular hours and particular kinds of days when she sits alone in the kitchen, perhaps with a cup of coffee at 10 in the morning, with the radio on low, and a question rises up in her that she does not quite know what to do with. The question does not have words yet. It is a feeling more than a question. The feeling is that there are aspects of herself that this life does not call upon. There are things she might have done if she'd been a man, or if she'd been born 10 years later, or if the war had not happened, or if any of 100 small variables had been different. The aspects are hard to name. She does not have a clear vision of who she might otherwise have been. She has only the feeling that some part of her remains somehow unused. She does not tell her husband about this. She would not know how to say it. She also would not want to. He would think she was unhappy with him, and she is not unhappy with him. She is happy with him. The feeling is not about him. The feeling is about her, and it is small, and it comes and goes, and most days it does not come at all. But it is there, in the background of her interior life, the small, unanswered question of what else she might have been. She's not alone in this. Across the country, in 1950, in millions of kitchens, in millions of front rooms, in millions of moments of quiet at 10 in the morning, or 3 in the afternoon, or 11 at night, women of her generation are sitting with versions of the same question. The question, when it finally gets articulated, will produce the second wave of the women's movement in the 1960s. Betty Friedan will write a book in 1963 called The Feminine Mystique, and in that book she will describe what she will call the problem that has no name. The problem that has no name is, more or less, the question that the wife in this house has been sitting with quietly for several years. When the book comes out, the wife will read it, and she will recognize herself in it, and she will feel both vindicated and obscurely sad. Vindicated because she will understand that what she was feeling was not just her own personal weakness, and obscurely sad because she will know, by then, that her own life is mostly set, and that the answers Friedan is articulating are answers for her daughters more than for her. Her daughters will go to college. She has decided this, although it has not been formally announced. The savings account in the wooden box on the dresser is, more than anything, the college fund. She has been quietly putting money aside for this since the older daughter was born. Her husband has gone along with the saving without entirely understanding why she's so determined. She has not explained it to him in detail. The not explaining is itself one of the small things she does that he does not quite see. She has decided that her daughters will not be in a position where their lives are set by the time they are 20. She has decided that her daughters will have options that she did not have. She has not framed this to herself as a political position. It is not political to her. It is simply what she wants for her daughters. The reasons why she wants it are bound up with the unanswered question that sometimes rises in her in the late morning quiet of the kitchen. She is, in this small way, doing one of the things that the women of her generation did across the entire country, almost without consultation, almost without coordination, almost without naming what they were doing. They were quietly raising the daughters who would, 20 years later, be the women who refused the constraints their mothers had accepted. They were investing in college funds. They were teaching their daughters to read voraciously. They were encouraging them to be curious, to be ambitious, to not settle for less than they wanted. They were doing all of this while continuing to live their own constrained lives, and the contradiction between the lives they were living and the lives they were preparing their daughters for was something many of them carried quietly, without comment, as another of the unspoken weights of post-war American marriage. The wife sometimes wonders what her own mother would think of all this. Her mother is 61 years old, lives 2 states away, and writes once a week. Her mother lived through the Great Depression as a young mother of 3. Her mother survived a husband who drank. Her mother held the family together through years that the wife herself cannot fully imagine. Her mother would, she suspects, not entirely understand the question that rises in the wife in the late morning kitchen. Her mother had no time for such questions. Her mother had to keep 3 children alive on almost nothing for a decade. The luxury of asking what else one might have been is the luxury of a generation that had, finally, enough food, enough security, enough margin to ask the question at all. The wife knows this. She does not feel ungrateful. She feels instead a kind of double awareness. She feels grateful for the life she has, which is so much easier than her mother's was, and she also feels the small persistent question of what the easier life might have allowed her to become. The two feelings are not in conflict. They live together in her. They are part of her. The way the small mole on her left shoulder is part of her. The way the slight tilt of her hand when she writes is part of her. She does not need to resolve the contradiction. She lives inside it. There is something about this kind of complex interior life that I think is worth pausing on, because it is so often left out of the popular picture of the 1950s American housewife. The picture, in the popular culture of every subsequent decade, has tended to flatten her into either a smiling icon or a frustrated cliché. She was neither. She was a person, like every person in every era, with a particular interior life that contained complicated and sometimes contradictory feelings, and she lived inside that interior life while also performing the daily work of running a household. She loved her husband and felt unfulfilled. She loved her daughters and was preparing them to leave the world she lived in. She loved her house and felt the smallness of its horizons. She loved her life and sometimes wondered what else it might have been. All of these things were true at the same time. They are true at the same time for many people in many eras. They were particularly true for the women of her generation, who were the first to have enough margin to ask the questions, and the last to have to live without the answers. She finishes her last small thought of the day. She squeezes her husband's hand gently. He does not wake. She closes her eyes. She sleeps. The night extends. The house is quiet. I want to take you now through the seasons of this same hour, because the hour we have been walking through is an autumn hour, and the same hour at other times of the year has its own texture, and I want you to be able to feel each of them. Summer. The same hour in late July. The windows are all open. The screens let in the cooling evening air. The light lasts until almost 9 o'clock. The children eat dinner in their bathing suits, and then are sent into the backyard to play through the long blue twilight. The radio plays from the back porch, on the extension cord the husband installed. The wife sits on the porch with a glass of iced tea. The husband sits beside her in the glider. They rock gently. The smell of the backyard in July, cut grass from earlier in the day, the roses against the fence, the faint smell of charcoal from a neighbour's earlier barbecue, fills the porch. The cicadas sing from the trees. The lightning bugs come out as the light fails. The children chase the lightning bugs in the dim yard, their voices high and sharp in the warm air. The kitchen is open behind the screen door, and the smell of dinner, cold chicken, potato salad, sliced tomatoes from the garden, drifts out. The summer evening is the longest and slowest of the year. The bedtime is later because the light has not yet failed. The bath is shorter because the children are already mostly clean and just need their faces washed and their teeth brushed. The mending basket is smaller in summer because the clothes are simpler. The husband reads on the porch, the wife darns a stocking, the children come in with bare feet and grass stains and the smell of outside on their hair, and they are tucked into bed with the windows open and the lace curtains moving slightly in the warm night air. There is something about a summer evening in 1950 that I think has been even more thoroughly lost than the autumn evening we have been walking through. The summer evening had a particular quality of stretched time. The light lasted forever. The children were outside until almost dark. The radio drifted out through screen doors all up and down the street. The block was alive with the small sounds of summer, the lawnmowers earlier in the day, the children's voices, the dogs barking, the radios, the cicadas. The collective summer evening of an American neighborhood in 1950 was a particular kind of sound texture that I do not know how to fully describe. It was the sound of a country that had not yet retreated indoors for the air conditioning. It was the sound of porches that were used. It was the sound of windows that were open. It was the sound of children who played in the street until their mothers called them home. I am not proposing we go back. The summer of 1950 was hot. The houses had no air conditioning, or had air conditioning only in one room. The wife in this house cooked in a kitchen that, in July, was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The sleeping at night was difficult. The children sweated through their sheets. The husband, who had served in the Pacific, found July nights in this house particularly hard, because the heat reminded him of things he did not want to remember. The summer of 1950 was not romantic. It was in many ways simply difficult, and the long blue evenings were earned by the long hot days. But the long blue evenings were also their own thing, and they belonged to a world that has, by now, almost entirely vanished. The air conditioning is everywhere. The windows are closed. The screen doors have given way to sliding glass doors. The porches, when they exist at all, are used less. The children are inside, on screens. The collective sound of the summer evening is gone. The cicadas still sing in the trees, but no one is on a porch with a glass of iced tea to hear them. Winter. The same hour in late January. The windows are sealed. The storm windows are on. The curtains are drawn against the cold. The furnace runs constantly. The smell of the house in winter is heavier and warmer. The smell of the gas furnace burning low, the smell of soup or stew on the stove from earlier, the smell of the woolen sweaters that the family lives in for 4 months of the year, the smell of the dry hot air that the furnace produces. The kitchen is the warmest room. The bedrooms, which are at the far ends of the heating system, are cooler. The children sleep in flannel pajamas and under heavy quilts that the wife's mother sent from the farm. The husband and wife sleep under a thick wool blanket and a feather comforter, with hot water bottles at their feet on the coldest nights. The radio is on for longer in winter. The evenings are dark by 5 o'clock. The family spends more time inside. The mending basket is fuller in winter. The heavy clothes wear harder. The gloves need to be re-knit at the fingertips. The wool socks need their heels rebuilt. The wife knits more in winter. She's working on a sweater for the older daughter. The yarn is in a basket beside her chair. The needles click softly under the radio. The husband reads more in winter. The book progresses faster. The Grant biography that has been taking him 2 months would, in winter, have taken him 3 weeks. The winter evening has a particular density. The house feels smaller in winter because the cold pushes everyone toward the centre, toward the kitchen and the front room, and the colder rooms become the rooms you only pass through on the way to bed. The bath at night is warmer and longer in winter because the bathroom is the warmest room in the house at that hour, with the steam from the hot water, and the children linger in the tub longer than they would in summer. The transition from the bathroom to the bedroom is the coldest few seconds of a winter night for a child. The moment of stepping out of the warm, steamy bathroom into the cold hallway, the quick run to the bedroom, the dive under the covers. The wife has a small ritual of warming the children's beds with a hot water bottle that she places between the sheets 15 minutes before bedtime. The bed is warm when the child gets in. The hot water bottle is removed and given to the next child. The whole process is a small piece of choreography that the wife has worked out over the years. The collective winter evening on the block is quieter than the summer evening. The windows are closed. The sounds do not carry from house to house the way they do in July. The block in January can feel almost still. Only the wind in the bare branches of the trees, only the faint sound of someone's car coming home late, only the bark of a dog 2 streets over. The block is more isolated in winter, with each house turned inward toward its own warm rooms. The street is quieter. The whole neighborhood is more deeply asleep. Spring. The same hour in late April, the transition season. The windows are open part way. The storm windows have been taken down. The husband took them down on a Saturday, climbing the wooden ladder, lifting each one out of its frame, carrying them to the garage to store for the summer. The air coming through the open windows is cool and damp and full of the smell of mud and the smell of the first lilacs blooming against the fence. The radio plays, the clock ticks. The children, who have been confined to the house through most of the winter, are now outside again until dark, riding bicycles on the sidewalk, playing some elaborate game in the backyard that involves the dog and a rope. There is a particular kind of spring evening that I want to describe to you, because it is, of all the seasons of this same hour, the one I find most beautiful. The evening when the first warm day of the year has finally come, and the wife opens the windows in the front room for the first time in 5 months, and the cool damp air pours in carrying the smell of the world coming back to life, and the radio is playing some music she has not heard in a long time, and the children are outside in the long blue twilight, and the husband has come home from work with mud on his shoes because the path through the park is finally clear of snow, and the whole household, after 5 months of being closed in against the cold, opens up like a flower in slow motion. That evening, the first true spring evening, happens once a year. The wife remembers it the way she remembers no other evening. She could tell you what she was cooking. She could tell you what was on the radio. She could tell you what her husband said when he came in. She does not need to remember it consciously. The memory of that evening is encoded in her in a way that survives her. When she's old, in 1990, sitting on the porch of a small apartment in a retirement community in Florida, she will close her eyes on a particular afternoon, and the first spring evening of 1950 will rise up in her with full sensory clarity, and she will be 27 again, in the front room of the house on the street she lived on for 20 years, and her husband will be alive again, and her children will be small again, and the radio will be playing, and the cool, damp spring air will be coming in through the open windows, and for a moment that is too brief to be measured, the entire texture of that life will be present in her again. The body remembers. The body remembers everything. Spring nights are the easiest sleeping of the year. The air is cool but not cold. The windows are open. The blankets are still on the bed but lighter than in winter. The household sleeps deeply. The children, exhausted from finally being able to be outside again, sleep deeply too. The wife and husband sleep deeply. The whole house is in a kind of restored rhythm that the winter had compromised. Autumn, the hour we have been walking through, the transitional time on the other side. The windows are still open part way, but the open hours are growing shorter. The storm windows have not yet gone up. The leaves are falling. The smell of the air is the smell of decay, not unpleasant decay, the rich, earthy decay of leaves breaking down on the ground. The smell of someone's wood smoke from a fireplace down the block. The smell of the apples in the bowl on the dining nook table. The smell of the first cold night that is coming but has not yet arrived. The autumn evening is the most reflective of the four. The summer is too lush. The winter is too still. The spring is too hopeful. The autumn is the season that knows something. The autumn is the season that understands that the long darkness is coming, that the light is failing, that the year is ending. The autumn evening has a particular kind of attention to small things. The way the light falls in the front room, the way the leaves move in the wind outside, the way the smell of the kitchen lingers after dinner is finished, the way the radio sounds in the slightly cooler air, the way the conversation, when there is conversation, drifts more easily into reflection. The wife in this house is, I think, an autumn person. She loves the autumn most of the seasons. She loves the way the year turns. She loves the smell of the leaves. She loves the quiet that begins to settle over the neighbourhood as the lush summer noise dies down. She loves the way the evening light comes earlier and earlier through October, until by the end of the month it is dark at 5:30, and the family is inside, gathered around the radio, and the year is sliding toward winter and Christmas and the long indoor months. The autumn is the season in which she does her best thinking. The autumn evenings, like the one we have walked through, are her favourite evenings of the year. She does not say this to anyone. She has never said it out loud. But it is true, and it is part of the texture of the evening we have just been inside. The wife who has been mending socks in the front room is, on some level, beneath conscious thought, particularly herself in the autumn. The autumn is her season. The hour we walked through was an autumn hour, and the texture of the hour is partly the texture of autumn itself, settling into a woman who loves it. Now I want to come back to the radio one more time, because there is a particular kind of program that I have not yet mentioned, and that I think is one of the most beautiful small things about the radio era of this household. The late-night music programme, the hour after the major shows have ended, somewhere around 10 o'clock, when the local station or the network would switch to a quiet music programme. A man with a low voice reading the names of songs into a microphone, the songs themselves played from records, the volume slightly lower than the daytime programming, the voice of Firestone, the Bell Telephone Hour, the various local equivalents in towns across the country. The late-night music programme was a particular kind of intimate radio that I think has no real modern equivalent. It assumed an audience that was settling down for the night. It played songs that were slower, more reflective, more melancholic. The voice of the announcer was confidential, almost whispered. The music was, in its own quiet way, designed for the last hour before bed. A song by Frank Sinatra, a song by Joe Stafford, a song by Perry Como, a song by Doris Day. The voices of the singers in this hour of the night sounded different than they sounded during the day. They sounded closer. They sounded like they were singing only to you. The wife in this front room sometimes listens to the late-night music programme after her husband has gone to bed. She does not do this often. But on certain nights, when she's not quite ready to sleep, when something is on her mind that she wants to think through, she will stay downstairs for an extra half hour. The radio will be turned down low. The lamp beside her chair will be on. She will sit in the quiet front room, and the slow songs will play, and she will think. She is, in those moments, perhaps the most herself she gets to be in any given day. The house is asleep. The work of the day is done. The work of tomorrow has not yet begun. There is, for a brief stretch, only her in her chair, with the music in the soft yellow light of the lamp. I find these late-night moments quietly beautiful. The woman who has been carrying everyone else's needs all day, sitting alone in the dim front room with a slow song playing softly on the radio, no obligations for 30 minutes, only her own thoughts and her own quiet. The 1950s housewife had vanishingly few such moments. The schedule did not allow for them. The household did not allow for them. The cultural expectations did not allow for them. The half hour at the end of the night, sometimes, when she finally let herself stay up alone with the radio, was one of the very few times when she was, in the most literal sense, not on duty for anyone. I want you to think about that. The half hour alone with the radio in the soft light of a single lamp in a quiet front room at the end of a long day. Have you ever given yourself that? Not as a treat, not as an indulgence, as a regular feature of your life. The half hour of your own, the half hour that belongs to no one but you. In 1950, the wife in this house gave it to herself perhaps once a week, perhaps less, and it was one of the things she remembered her whole life. The slow song, the yellow light, the empty house, the small reclaiming of herself. She's not having such a night tonight. She has gone up with her husband, she's asleep beside him. The radio is off, but the half hour exists in her as a possibility, as a thing she has done before and will do again. The half hour is part of the texture of her life, even on nights when she does not use it. Knowing that she could is part of what makes the rest of her life livable. The neighbourhood. Again, I want to take you through one more pass of the neighbourhood, this time at a different time of night, because the texture of the neighbourhood changes through the hours of the late evening, and I want you to feel the full arc of it. 8 o'clock. The dinner dishes are being washed in most houses. The children are in the bathtubs. The lights in the kitchens are on. The radios are playing through the open windows. You can walk down the street and hear faintly the same programmes coming from 3 or 4 different houses at once. The Jack Benny programme on Sunday. Fibber McGee on Tuesday. The Lux Radio Theatre on Monday. The collective sound of the neighbourhood is the sound of many radios playing the same thing. 9 o'clock. The children are mostly in bed. The husbands are in their armchairs. The wives are in their chairs or finishing in the kitchen. The radios are still playing. The lights are on in the front rooms. The lights in the kitchens are off. The lights in the bedrooms are off. The houses have rearranged themselves around the front room. 9:30. The radios are still playing, but quieter. The last show of the evening's winding down. The cars on the street have mostly stopped coming in. The driveways are full. The men who work the late shift have gone. They left earlier. The men who work the regular shift are home and have been home for hours. The block is in its evening state. 10 o'clock. The radios go off one by one. The lights in the front rooms go off one by one. The lights in the bedrooms come on briefly, then go off again. The bedtime routines complete themselves. By 10:30, perhaps a quarter of the houses on the block still have a light on somewhere. By 11, perhaps an eighth. By 11:30, almost none. Midnight. The block is dark. The street lights are still on. The leaves are still falling. The wind, when it rises, moves through the trees and the eaves and the gutters, and the sounds of the wind are the only sounds. The houses are full of sleeping people. The total population of the block, the men and women and children inside the dark houses, is perhaps 120 people. All of them, almost without exception, are asleep at midnight. The block, as a unit, sleeps as a unit. The synchronization is real. The synchronization is profound. By 2 in the morning, the block is in its deepest sleep. The rhythm of the houses is the rhythm of slow, even breathing, multiplied by 120 people, layered through dark rooms, behind dark windows, beneath dark roofs. The streetlight hums. A cat crosses the street and disappears into a hedge. A truck makes a delivery several blocks away, the milk truck, the first run of the morning, and the sound of the truck is faint and far away, and not enough to disturb the sleep of anyone. By 4, the milk truck is on this block. The milkman, a man named Frank, who has been delivering milk on this street for 8 years, walks quietly from his truck to each porch and back. He sets the bottles in their small wooden boxes on each porch. The empty bottles from yesterday clink softly as he picks them up. He has done this every weekday morning for 8 years. He knows every porch by feel. He could deliver the milk in the dark, and in November and December and January he often does, because the sun does not rise until after he's done. The milkman is a small connecting thread between all the houses on the block. He knows which households are buying more milk this month, usually because of a new baby or a teenage son who has hit his growth spurt. He knows which households are buying less, usually because of a job change or an illness or a couple whose children have grown and moved out. He knows, in a small way, the rhythms of every family on the block. He does not gossip. He just notes. The note is part of his work, the way the bottles are part of his work. By 4:30, the milkman has finished the block. The bottles are on every porch. He drives off to the next street. The block sleeps on. The sky in the east, far away, begins to lighten very slightly. Not enough to call it dawn yet. The streetlights are still on. The houses are still dark. By 5, the first lights begin to come on. One light in a kitchen in the house we have been visiting. The wife is the first up. She's in her bathrobe. She has lit the burner under the percolator. The smell of coffee is starting. The morning is beginning. The hour we have been walking through is over. The evening we have been sitting inside is done. A new day is starting, and the rhythms of the day will repeat, with their small variations until the next evening, when the same hour will arrive again, and the woman in this kitchen, and the husband and the children will sit through it once more, in their own particular way, as they have for the past 4 years, and as they will for the next 19 years until they finally move out of this house in 1967. Before I take you to the kitchen for the final image, I want to walk you through a few more things. I want to take you down to Main Street to the appliance store, where the television sets sit in the window. I want to take you inside the eventual arrival of the Zenith console in this house, in 1953, 3 years from the evening we have been walking through. I want to take you back further still, into the moments of the wife's day that we have not yet visited. And I want to spend a long quiet moment on what is meant by the word home, because I think that word, more than any other, is what this entire story has been trying to find its way around. The appliance store is on Main Street, 6 blocks from the house we have been visiting. The store is called Henderson's. It has been in the same location since 1927. Mr. Henderson is in his 60s. His son, who came back from the war, works in the store now and will eventually take it over. The front window of the store in 1950 contains 5 television sets, all of them turned on, all of them tuned to whatever the local station is broadcasting at the moment. The window is what catches your eye when you walk down Main Street. You can be walking from the grocery store to the post office, and you will, almost without choosing to, stop in front of Henderson's window for a minute. The pictures on the screens, the voices coming faintly through the glass, the way the moving images draw the eye in a way that no other shop window does. The wife in this house has stopped in front of Henderson's window perhaps 20 times in the past 2 years. She has not gone inside. She and her husband have agreed that they are not ready to buy a television yet. The price is high, somewhere between $250 and $400 depending on the model, which is most of a month's salary. The house has not been entirely paid for. The savings account has the girls' eventual education in it. The car is older than they would like. A television is, for now, a luxury they have decided to defer. But she stops in front of the window anyway. She watches. She tries to imagine what it would be like to have one of these in her front room. She tries to imagine what evenings would look like with one. She is not, when she stops at the window, thinking about whether to buy one. She's doing something more fundamental. She's trying to picture the future. She's trying to feel what the next decade is going to be like. The television in the window of Henderson's is, in a real sense, the first time the future has appeared in this town as a thing one can look at directly. The future has previously been something you read about in magazines, or heard about on the radio, or saw in the newsreels at the movies. The future was always at a distance, in some larger city, in some abstract realm of expert prediction. The television in Henderson's window is the future, sitting on Main Street, plugged in, broadcasting moving pictures into the autumn afternoon. The wife and her neighbours can stand in front of it and watch the future happen. Her husband stopped in front of the window last Saturday. He stood there for several minutes. He watched a small portion of a college football game that was being broadcast on the screen. He had not been particularly interested in college football. But the moving image of the players running down the field, in real time, on a screen in a window in his hometown, while the game itself was being played hundreds of miles away, that image stayed with him. He came home that evening and mentioned it to his wife. He said, "You know, eventually we're going to have to get one of those." She agreed. They did not set a date. But the conversation was, in some way, the first step. The thing had been said aloud. It will be 3 more years before the Zenith console is finally delivered to this house. The conversation will return at intervals through those 3 years. The wife will watch Mrs. Anderson across the street begin to host the Friday night gatherings around the television. The husband will, over time, accept several invitations and watch boxing matches on the Andersons' set. The girls will grow older and will begin to ask with increasing frequency when they will get a television of their own. The savings account will reach the level the wife wants it to be at. The car will be repaired one more time. The roof will be patched on the kitchen side. The household will reach, in early 1953, a point where the deferred purchase no longer needs to be deferred. The Zenith will be ordered in February of 1953. It will be delivered on a Saturday morning in early March by 2 men from Henderson's in a panel truck. The 2 men will carry the console up the front walk, through the front door, across the front room. They will set it down against the long wall where the bookcase used to be. The bookcase will already have been moved to the dining nook by the husband, the previous evening, in preparation. The 2 men will plug the television in. They will adjust the rabbit ear antenna on top of the cabinet. They will turn the set on. The screen will fill with the test pattern that television stations broadcast in the morning hours before programming begins. The 2 men will say goodbye and leave. The husband and wife and 2 daughters will stand in the front room, looking at the test pattern on the screen for a long time. There is a particular moment in the history of the 1950s American household that I keep thinking about. The moment when the television was first turned on in the front room. The moment when the family stood together and looked at it. The moment when something fundamental about evening time was about to change, and they could feel it changing, although they could not yet have said exactly how. That moment in this house will happen in March of 1953. The mother will be 29 years old. The father will be 28. The older daughter will be 10. The younger daughter will be 7. They will all 4 stand in the front room, looking at the test pattern, and the television will be on, and the radio will be off, and the future will have arrived. The first program they will watch together will be the Saturday afternoon western that came on at 3 o'clock, The Lone Ranger. The girls will be transfixed. The husband will be amused. The wife will sit in her chair, with her mending basket beside her as she has always done, and she will mend a sock while the television plays, and she will look up at the screen occasionally, and she will find that, after a few minutes, she has stopped mending. Her hands are still. She's watching the screen. The sock is on her lap. The needle has not moved. She will catch herself doing this. She will look down at the sock. She will resume the mending. A few minutes later, the same thing will happen. She will be watching the screen again, and her hands will be still. She will catch herself again. This pattern will repeat through the entire Lone Ranger episode. By the end of the program, she will have completed perhaps half a sock. In a normal evening of mending with the radio playing, she would have completed 2 or 3 socks in the same time. She will not say anything about this to her husband. She will not yet know how to articulate what she has noticed. But she has noticed something. The television asks for the eyes in a way that the radio did not. The mending and the radio could coexist. The mending and the television cannot. One of them has to give, and over the course of the next year in this household it will be the mending that gives. The mending will get done. It has to get done. But it will get done in different hours. In the kitchen, in the early afternoon, while the children are at school. On Saturday mornings, while the husband is doing his repairs in the basement. In small 50-minute increments throughout the day. The slow evening hour of mending in the front room, the hour we have been walking through, will quietly migrate to other hours, and the evening hour will become, almost entirely, an hour of looking at the screen. The husband will go through his own version of this transition. He will continue to read his books for a while. He will sit in his armchair with the book open in his lap and the television playing in front of him, and he will try to read while watching. He will discover, as his wife discovered, that this is not really possible. The pages turn slowly, then very slowly, then not at all. The book sits open on his lap. His eyes are on the screen. After a while, he stops bringing books to the front room in the evenings. The books migrate to his Saturday study. The book that has been in his lap during this evening we have been walking through, the Grant biography, will be one of the last evening books of his life. Within a year of the television's arrival, he will have given up evening reading. He will read on Saturdays, in his study, in the daylight, for an hour or two, with the door closed. The rest of his reading life will gradually end. The children will love the television. They will love it more than they love anything else in the house. They will, by 1954, be asking to watch it from the moment they come home from school. The wife will, by 1954, have to enforce limits. Homework first, supper first, no television during meals. The Andersons across the street, who got their television 3 years before this family, have not enforced such limits, and the wife has noticed that the Anderson children read fewer books and talk less at dinner than her own children do. The wife is determined that the television will not change her household as completely as it has changed the Andersons. She will, in 1954 and 55 and 56, be partially successful at this. She will hold a certain line, the reading in the daytime, the dinner table conversation, the Sunday afternoon spent outside. The line will hold mostly, until the older daughter is a teenager, at which point the line will break and the line will not be reconstructible. But that is in the future. In the autumn evening we have been walking through in 1950, the future has not yet arrived in this house. The television is in the window of Henderson's 6 blocks away. The radio is playing in the front room. The mending basket is beside the wife's chair. The husband is reading. The slow hour is holding. Nothing has yet changed. I want to take you through one more pass of this hour because I want you to feel its full slow extent before we close. 7:30 in the evening. The children are coming down from the bath. The wife is finishing in the kitchen. The husband has set down the newspaper for a moment and is listening to a particular song on the radio. The lamp on the small table in the front room is the warmest spot of yellow light in the house. The clock on the mantel ticks. The kitchen smells of supper and dish soap. The bathroom smells of steam and ivory soap. The bedrooms are cool and dark, waiting. 7:45. The children are in their nightgowns. The wife is reading to the younger daughter from a picture book. The older daughter is in her own bed already, reading her own book by the light of the bedside lamp. The husband has resumed the newspaper, the radio plays, a different song, the clock ticks. 8 o'clock. The picture book is closed. The wife is kissing the younger daughter good night. The hallway light is on. The bedroom light is going off. The night light is on. The wife turns the older daughter's light off. She has read her chapter. She has agreed it is time. The older daughter is sleepy. She rolls over. The wife stands in the doorway for a moment looking at her daughters. She closes the door not quite all the way. She walks down the stairs. 8:15. The wife is in the kitchen. The dishes are still waiting. She runs the water hot. She begins to wash. The husband can hear the water running in the kitchen. He turns a page of the newspaper. The radio plays. The clock ticks. 8:30. The dishes are done. The wife is drying her hands. She wipes the counter. She wipes the gas range. She folds the dish towel over the oven handle. She turns off the kitchen light. She walks through the dark dining nook to the front room. She sits in her chair, she picks up the mending basket. She begins on the first sock. 8:45. The husband has finished his chapter. He closes the book for a moment and sets it on the small table beside his chair. He stretches. He looks at his wife. She glances up from the sock. She smiles. He smiles. He picks the book up again and finds his place. The radio plays, the clock ticks. 9 o'clock. The first sock is done. The wife moves to the second. The husband is 2 chapters into the next part of the biography. The radio program changes. The network program ends, and the local station resumes with a music hour. The volume of the music is a little lower than the volume of the program. The husband does not adjust the dial. He likes it this way. The clock strikes the hour. The wife glances at the clock and continues working. 9:15. The second sock is done. The wife moves to the trousers. The husband is still reading. The radio plays, the clock ticks. A car passes on the street outside. The sound rises and fades. The house is still. 9:30. The trousers are done. The button is on. The wife is on the dress hem. The husband has set the book down and is leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed, listening to the music. He is not asleep. He is resting. His wife sees him, and her hands continue moving without her thinking about it, and she has a moment of intense, quiet love for this man, whose face she has been looking at for 8 years, and whose face she will be looking at for another 22. The moment passes, the needle continues moving. The dress hem progresses. 9:45. The dress hem is done. The wife folds the dress and lays it on the arm of her chair. The mending basket is empty. The husband opens his eyes. The music plays. The clock ticks. They are both very tired. The day has been long. 10 o'clock. The husband stands. He stretches. He crosses to the radio. He turns it off. The room is silent except for the clock. He looks at his wife. She stands. She gathers the trousers and the dress and the socks. They walk together to the kitchen, where they each drink a glass of water from the tap. They check the back door. They turn off the kitchen light. They walk back through the front room. He turns off the floor lamp. The room goes dark. 10:15. They are upstairs. The teeth are brushed. The faces are washed. The cold cream is applied. The curlers are in. The pajamas and the nightgown are on. The bedspread is turned down. The lamps are turned off. They lie in the dark. The window is open an inch. The curtains move. The clock downstairs ticks faintly through the floor. 10:20. They are asleep. This is the rhythm. This is the shape. This is the slow, even arc of the last hour before bed in a 1950s American home, in autumn, on a weeknight, in the year 1950. The whole evening has the same texture as a long, slow breath. The whole house has the same rhythm as a sleeping body. The whole block has the same arc as a single household. The whole country, more or less, is moving through the same hour together. I want to say something about the word home, because I think this is what we have actually been describing. Not the 1950s, not the radio, not the television's arrival, not even the hour itself. We have been describing what home was, in a particular era, in a particular kind of household. The thing the word home meant in that era is a thing the word home no longer entirely means, and I want to put some words to what it meant, because I think it is worth being able to say. Home, in 1950, was a place that was made every day, not bought, not consumed, made. The wife made the home with her hands, all day, every day. The husband made the home with his hands on weekends. The children, even the children, made small contributions, setting the table, helping with the dishes, sweeping the porch. The home was a thing the family produced together, not a thing they simply occupied. The labour of producing the home was the substance of family life. The home was the labour and the labour was the home. Home was a place that smelled like itself, not like a candle, not like an air freshener, not like a scented detergent, like itself. The particular combination of the family's cooking, the family's soap, the family's wool, the family's bodies, the family's house. Every house had its own smell. The wife could be blindfolded and led into any house on the block and could tell you, by smell alone, whose house she was in. The neighbours could do the same. The houses were not interchangeable. They smelled like their families. Home was a place that sounded like itself. The particular creaks of the particular floorboards, the particular hum of the particular refrigerator, the particular tick of the particular clock, the particular voices of the particular people who lived there. The wife in this house could lie in her bed with her eyes closed and identify, from any sound, what room of her house she was in and what activity was happening in it. She could tell, from the slight shift of the floor, whether the husband was getting up from his armchair or stretching in it. She could tell, from the sound of the water in the pipes, whether the older daughter was running a bath or just washing her hands. The house was a kind of acoustic instrument that she had been listening to for years, and she knew every note of its music. Home was a place where time was not the same as time elsewhere. Time at the office was one kind of time at the grocery store was another, time at home was a third kind, a slower kind, a kind that moved in its own particular rhythms, hooked to the meals and the chores and the rituals of the household rather than to the external clock. The time of the evening hour we have been walking through was home time. Home time has a particular pace that the modern, always connected household has, in some ways, lost. The clock has come into the home in ways that the clock was not previously in the home. The schedule has come into the home. The pace of the outside world has come into the home. The home, for the modern person, is no longer entirely a separate temporal zone. It is, in many ways, simply more of the outside world, with the outside world's pace, in a different physical location. Home was a place where the people in it knew each other in ways that I think are very difficult to reproduce now. The wife knew her husband's silences. The husband knew his wife's sighs. The mother knew her children's footsteps. The children knew their parents' moods from the sound of the dishes being set down on the table. The four people in this house were, in their own ways, intimately known to each other in the small physical particulars of daily life, in a way that required a specific kind of close attention, sustained over years, in a small shared space. The smallness of the house, the density of the time together, the absence of competing inputs, all conspired to produce a kind of mutual knowing that the modern household, with its larger spaces and its more distributed schedules and its multiple screens, may not produce in quite the same way. I am not saying this is better. I want to keep being careful. There are kinds of knowing that the modern household produces that the 1950s household did not. The modern parent who watches their child play soccer every Saturday at the field is knowing their child in a way that the 1950s parent may not have. The modern friends who text each other through the day are knowing each other in a way that the 1950s friends, with their once-a-week phone calls, did not. The forms of intimacy have changed, not simply diminished. I do not want to claim that the 1950s family was more intimate than the modern family. I want to claim that they were intimate differently. The intimacy was structural. The intimacy was built into the physical and temporal architecture of the household. The intimacy was a byproduct of the way the home was made. And when the home stopped being made the way it was made in 1950, the intimacy that was a byproduct of that making changed too, not disappeared, changed. The wife who is no longer mending socks in the front room is not less intimate with her husband. She is intimate differently. The husband who is no longer reading a biography in the chair across from her is not less present in the marriage. He is present differently. The differences are real, and they are worth noticing, and noticing them is not the same as mourning them, though it can sometimes feel like mourning. The night extends, the neighbourhood sleeps, the streetlight hums, the leaves fall, the synchronized evening for one more night holds. I want to ask you something, and I mean this as gently as I can. When you think about the home you grew up in, what do you remember most? Not the big things, not the holidays, not the dramatic moments, the small things, the smell of the kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, the sound your mother made when she opened the back door, the texture of the carpet in the front hallway, the way the light came in through the kitchen window in October. The small particulars that are, in fact, the substance of what a home was for you. If you can answer that question, you have in your memory a version of what I have been trying to describe in this story. The home as a set of small sensory and temporal particulars. The home as a thing that made itself, every day, through the actions of the people in it. The home as a thing that has, in your own life, been replaced or modified or transformed, depending on what kind of life you have built. The home of your childhood is, in some way, always the home you measure other homes against. The wife in this house in 1950 is building, with every dish she washes and every sock she mends and every story she reads to her daughter, the home that those daughters will spend the rest of their lives measuring other homes against. She does not know she is doing this. She is just doing what is in front of her to do, but she is doing it. The accumulation of small particulars that her daughters will, 50 years from now in their own old age, remember with sudden vivid clarity when they smell a particular kind of soap or hear a particular kind of song on the radio. I find this quietly beautiful. The way home is built, the way home becomes the standard against which all other places are measured, the way the small, slow hour we have been walking through is in fact one of the bricks of the home the daughters are growing up inside. I want to tell you a thing that I keep coming back to. The wife in this house, the woman whose evening we have been walking through, will live to be 94 years old. She will outlive her husband by 30 years. She will outlive most of her siblings. She will outlive several of her friends. She will live in her final years in a small apartment in a retirement community in Florida, where her older daughter eventually moves her in 1998. In 1998, when the wife is 75 years old, she will live alone in this small apartment, and she will have very little to do, and she will have, for the first time in her adult life, large amounts of unstructured time. She will spend a lot of that time remembering. She will not by then be much good at conversation. She will be slightly deaf. She will have lost most of her teeth. Her hands will shake. But her memory, the memory of small particulars, will be the sharpest thing about her. She will be able to describe in detail the wallpaper in the front room of the house we have been visiting, the pattern of the linoleum in the kitchen, the particular smell of the coal furnace in the basement before it was converted to gas, the exact arrangement of the tools on her husband's pegboard, the face of her younger daughter at 4 years old, before her younger daughter became the woman who would eventually also have her own daughter and her own pegboard and her own arrangements. The memory of the slow evenings in particular will be sharp in her in 1998. She will, on certain afternoons, close her eyes in the Florida sun coming through the screen door, and she will be back in the front room of the house in autumn 1950, with the radio playing and the husband reading and the children sleeping upstairs and the mending in her hands. The memory will be so vivid that she will, in those moments, almost not be in Florida anymore. She will be in the front room. She'll be 27. She will be a young woman with her whole adult life in front of her, married to a man who will love her for the next 22 years, raising daughters who will eventually fly her down to Florida and check on her once a week. The memory of the evening we have walked through together tonight is not, when she's 75, the memory of an extraordinary evening. It is the memory of an ordinary evening, one of perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 such evenings she lived through in that house. But the ordinariness, by then, is the precious thing. The 1,000 similar evenings have in her mind condensed into something like one perfect evening, the essence of which is the slow yellow light, and the radio and the clock and the husband across the room, and the children safely upstairs and the world quiet and held. That is, I think, what I have been trying to say. The slow evenings were not, at the time they were lived, recognized as anything special. They were the daily ordinary texture of life. The recognition came later. The recognition came when the slow evenings stopped happening, replaced by faster, louder, more fragmented evenings, and the people who had lived through the slow evenings looked back and realized what they had been inside. I do not want this to come across as nostalgic. I have tried, throughout this story, to be honest about what was hard about that era, what was constraining, what was painful, what was unjust. The slow evening was not a paradise. It was an evening. It existed inside a world that had its own deep problems. But the slow evening was real, and the texture of it was real, and the value of it, the particular slow, yellow-held quality of it, was real. And recognizing what was real about it is not the same as wishing the rest of the era had also been preserved. The wife in this house, when she is 75, will not be wishing the rest of 1950 back. She will not miss the constraints. She will not miss the limited options. She will not miss the wartime aftermath that her husband carried. She will not miss the cold of winter in a house with bad insulation. She will not miss the ironing. She will not miss the laundry on Mondays. She will not miss any of the things that were difficult. But she will miss the slow yellow hour. She will miss the radio playing softly while she mended socks. She will miss the clock on the mantel. She will miss her husband's hand on her hand in the dark. She will miss the children sleeping safely down the hall. She will miss the way the house breathed at night, slow and even, with all 4 of them inside it held. The thing she will miss is the thing we have been describing, and the thing we have been describing is, in some sense, available to us still in fragments, in small moments, if we know to look for it. The slow yellow hour does not require the radio. It does not require the mending. It does not require the gas range or the pegboard or the percolator on the back of the stove. It requires only that we slow down, that we be in one room, that we do one thing, that we be present with the other person in the room, or with our own thoughts if we are alone, without the constant input of the larger world. The slow yellow hour is, in some sense, a posture, a relationship to time, a willingness to let the small particulars of an ordinary evening be the substance of the evening, rather than treating the evening as something to get through on the way to whatever is next. It is hard to do. The modern world makes it hard. The modern world is in some ways structurally opposed to the slow yellow hour. The notifications, the streaming services, the constant low hum of news and content and interaction, the expectation of responsiveness, the fragmented attention. All of these things make the slow yellow hour difficult to find and even more difficult to inhabit when found. The slow yellow hour does not happen on its own anymore. It has to be chosen. It has to be protected. It has to be built deliberately by people who have decided that they want it back. I'm not saying you should want it back. I'm not making that argument. But I am saying that the wife in this house, sitting in her chair in 1950, with the radio playing and the mending in her hands, was inside something that the rest of her life would teach her was worth having had. And if there is a version of it available in your own life, even a small version, even a 15-minute version once a week, I think it might be worth looking for. The clock on the mantel in this front room strikes 10. The radio is being turned off. The light is being turned off. The husband and wife are going up the stairs together. The night extends. The neighbourhood sleeps. The synchronised evening, for one more night, holds. There is one more walk I want to take you on before we go back to the kitchen. I want to walk you down Main Street, in the late afternoon, before the evening we have been walking through. I want to show you the town this house sits inside, because the town is part of the texture of the evening, and the town in 1950 was a particular kind of place that has, in many ways, also vanished. The town has perhaps 8,000 people. It is not large. It is not small. It is the kind of town that, in 1950, was the dominant unit of American settlement, bigger than a village, smaller than a city, large enough to have its own institutions and small enough that most people knew most other people by sight, if not by name. There is a main street, perhaps 5 blocks long, running through the centre of the town. The main street contains, in the order you would encounter them walking from the north end to the south, the following businesses. Henderson's appliance store, which we have already visited. The television sets in the window. Mr. Henderson behind the counter. His son in the back room repairing a radio. The smell of vacuum tubes and machine oil, and the slightly burned smell of soldering. Next door, the Five and Dime. Woolworths in many towns, although in this town it is a local store called Henley's. The Five and Dime contains everything. Small toys for the children, sewing supplies for the wife, hardware for small repairs, stationery and pens, costume jewellery, cosmetics. A small soda fountain at the back where the teenagers gather after school. The smell of the Five and Dime is the particular smell of cheap goods and floor wax and the syrup from the soda fountain. Next, the Rexall drugstore. Mr. Phipps, the pharmacist, behind the counter at the back. The small shelves of patent medicines, the penny candy in glass jars, the greeting cards in their wooden display rack, the magazine rack by the front window. Life, Look, the Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, Ladies' Home Journal, McCall's, Good Housekeeping. The wife in this house buys a magazine perhaps once a month, when one of the issues has an article she particularly wants to read. The magazines are kept on a shelf in the front room and read at intervals over the following weeks. Next, the grocery store. The A&P, not a supermarket in the way the term would later come to mean, a grocery store with 3 aisles, a butcher counter at the back, a produce section near the front, a single cashier at the door. The wife shops here on Saturdays. She knows the butcher by name. His name is Tony. He has been at the A&P for 12 years. She knows what cuts of meat he carries and what the prices were last week, and what is likely to be on sale this week. The shopping at the A&P is a social occasion as much as it is a transaction. She sees several neighbours there every Saturday. They talk in the aisles. The shopping that should take half an hour takes an hour and a half because of the conversations. Next, the dress shop. Hilda's. Hilda has owned the shop since 1934. She sells women's dresses, mostly off the rack with some custom alteration. The wife in this house buys perhaps one dress a year from Hilda's. Most of her dresses she makes herself, from patterns and fabric she buys at the 5 and dime, or, for special occasions, fabric she orders from a catalogue. Hilda's is for the dresses she does not make, a church dress, a wedding guest dress, perhaps once every 2 or 3 years a special occasion dress. Next, the barber shop. Otto's. Otto has been the barber on this street since 1927. 3 chairs, 2 barbers, including Otto. The husband in this house gets his hair cut here every 3 weeks. The barber shop is, in this town as in most towns of the era, a centre of male social life. The husbands of the neighbourhood come here. They talk about the news, about sports, about local politics, about the weather. The wife is not allowed inside in any practical sense. Women do not go to the barber shop. The wife of 1950 has her hair done at the beauty parlour across the street, run by Otto's wife, which is the female equivalent. Next, the hardware store. Mr. Coleman's. 2 long aisles of tools, fasteners, paint, plumbing supplies. The husband in this house comes here on Saturdays for whatever he needs for the week's repairs. Mr. Coleman knows him by name. Mr. Coleman knows what tools he owns and what tools he's likely to want to buy next. Mr. Coleman saves catalogues for him when new ones come in. The hardware store is, in many ways, a male social space the way the beauty parlour is a female social space. A place where you go for goods, but where you also stand around and talk for 15 minutes longer than the transaction requires. Next, the post office, a small brick building. The post office is where the mail comes in and goes out. The wife in this house mails letters here perhaps once a week. A letter to her mother, a thank you note, a cheque for a bill that cannot be paid in person. She knows the postmaster's name. He knows her name. He asks after her children. She asks after his grandchildren. The exchanges are short, but they are not transactional. They are part of the texture of belonging to a place. Next, the diner. Sam's. Open from 5:30 in the morning until 8 in the evening. The husband eats lunch here once a week on Wednesdays, with 2 men from his office. The Wednesday lunch is one of his small fix points. He has been eating lunch at Sam's on Wednesdays since 1947. The diner has booths along one wall and a counter with stools along the other. The smell of the diner is the smell of coffee and bacon grease and grilled onions, layered in the air over decades. Next, the bank. The savings bank where the wooden box on the bedroom dresser contains the passbook. The manager, Mr. Edwards, has been there for 19 years. He knows the husband, he knows the wife, he knows the financial history of half the families in town, and he keeps that knowledge entirely to himself. The bank is, in this town as in most towns of the era, a place where a person could go and be known. Next, the movie theatre. The Bijou, 1 screen, 2 showings per night, plus a matinee on Saturdays. The family goes perhaps once a month when something they want to see is playing. The popcorn is 15 cents. The tickets are 40 cents for adults, 20 cents for children. The wife and husband sit in the back. The girls sit a few rows ahead with their friends when they are with friends, or with their parents when they are not. Next, the church. The Methodist church the family attends. The minister, Reverend Hartley, is in his 50s. He has been at this church for 9 years. He knows the family. He visited the wife in the hospital after the younger daughter was born. He baptized both girls. He married the parents next door. He buried the widow's husband 3 years ago. The church is the largest building on Main Street. The bell tower rises above the rest of the block. The bell rings at 9 on Sunday mornings, calling the congregation. The bell rings at noon on weekdays, marking the lunch hour. The bell rings at 6 in the evening, marking the supper hour. The bell ringing through the town is part of the audible texture of being alive in this place. The wife in this house can hear the bell from the kitchen at noon, and at 6 every day, and the bell is, in some way, the audible structure of her day. Next, the school. The elementary school the older daughter attends. 2 stories of red brick, built in 1906, a bell on the roof that rings at 9 and at 3. The same bell that rang for the parents when they were children, in their own elementary schools, in their own towns. The continuity of school bells. The continuity of school buildings. The continuity of the school day, which has not changed substantially in 50 years, and which will not change substantially for another 20. This is the town. This is the world the family lives inside. The walk from one end of Main Street to the other takes 10 minutes. The total number of distinct businesses on Main Street is perhaps 25. The number of those businesses that the family interacts with regularly is perhaps 15. The wife knows by name perhaps 100 people in town. The husband knows by name perhaps 200. The town is a known place. The town is, in some sense, a single extended household, of which the actual household in the house we have been visiting is one small unit. When I think about what has changed between this town and the town that has, in many places, replaced it, I keep coming back to this fact. The wife in this house could walk the length of Main Street and have, by the end of the walk, said hello to 12 or 15 people she knew by name. The modern equivalent of this walk in most places does not produce that. The Main Street has, in many towns, been replaced by a strip mall, or by a shopping centre on the edge of town, or by online shopping that takes place entirely without leaving the house. The clerks at the chain stores in the strip mall do not know the customers. The shopping is anonymous. The walk down what used to be Main Street in many towns is a walk past empty storefronts and closed businesses and the slow decay of the local commercial centre. I am not romanticising this either. Main Street in 1950 had its own problems. The shops were small and the selection was limited and the prices were sometimes high. The town was provincial in ways that limited its residents. The Main Street I have just walked you through was, for the people who lived there, sometimes a comfort and sometimes a constraint. The young woman who wanted to be something other than a wife and mother had very few resources on this Main Street to help her become that something else. The young man whose desires did not fit the heterosexual mould of the time found this Main Street suffocating. The black family who tried to move into the town in 1948 was quietly but firmly discouraged from buying a house, and the constraint was reinforced by every business on this Main Street. The town was not, for everyone, the warm, comfortable, known place I've been describing. For many people, it was a place to escape from. But for the family in the house we have been visiting, the town was on balance the warm, comfortable, known place. They fit into it well. They benefited from it. The wife was not aspiring to be something other than what the town had made room for her to be. The husband was not chafing against the constraints. The children were too young to feel the constraints yet, although the older daughter would, in 15 years, feel them sharply and leave the town behind. The family was, for this particular evening in 1950, in a kind of small, comfortable fit with the world around them, and the slow yellow hour we have been walking through was, in part, the product of that fit. The town sleeps now at this hour. Main Street is dark except for the streetlights and a single light still on in the window of the diner, where Sam is closing up. Mr. Henderson left the appliance store at 6. The Five and Dime closed at 5:30. The bank closed at 3. The post office closed at 5. The barber shop closed at 6:30. The hardware store closed at 6. The grocery store closed at 6. The dress shop closed at 5:30. The town is closed. The town is asleep. The bell in the church tower rang at 6 and will not ring again until the morning. The block we have been visiting is one of several blocks in the residential neighbourhoods that radiate out from Main Street. There are perhaps 30 such blocks in the town. They are all asleep. The whole town in 1950 is in the slow yellow hour or just past it. 8,000 people in their slow yellow hours simultaneously. The town is a single sleeping organism. The town is breathing. And beyond the town, the country, hundreds of similar towns, thousands of similar towns, millions of similar households, the whole country in its slow yellow hour, breathing together. The synchronized evening on a scale that, by 2024, will have become almost unimaginable. I want to say one more thing about the unified evening before we end. The unified evening was, in some sense, a kind of unspoken trust. The country trusted itself, on a Tuesday night in October of 1950, to be doing roughly the same thing in roughly the same hours. The trust was not articulated. No one talked about it. But it was there. It was the foundation underneath the radio programming, the foundation underneath the schedules, the foundation underneath the way the country planned its days. The country trusted that at 10 o'clock on a weeknight the country was going to bed. The loss of that trust is one of the things that, in the present, I think is felt most acutely without being named. The country no longer trusts itself in that way. The country is no longer doing the same thing in the same hours. The country no longer breathes together. We are each of us in our own evenings, on our own schedules, with our own content in our own rooms. The synchronized evening is gone, and the trust that the synchronized evening produced is also gone. The country is in a kind of permanent state of being awake at all hours, with some portion of it always doing one thing and some portion of it always doing another, and the sense that there is a time when the country rests is no longer available to us. I do not know if we will ever get it back. I'm not sure we should try. The synchronized evening had its constraints, and the freedom that has replaced it has its real benefits. But I want to acknowledge what we have lost, because I think it is one of the things that, without our quite knowing it, is contributing to the particular tiredness of modern American life. The country never rests, because there is no time when the country agrees to rest together. The wife in this house, falling asleep beside her husband in 1950, is held by the agreement of millions of other households doing the same thing. The modern person, falling asleep at 11:30 or 12:30 or 1 in the morning, alone or with a partner, in their own particular timing, is not held by that agreement. The holding is gone. We are each, in our own evenings, alone with the night. I do not want to end on that note. I want to end where this story has been going all along, in the kitchen. I want to go back inside the house one more time. I want to take you back to the kitchen, because that is where this story began, and that is where it should end. It is now somewhere close to dawn, 5 o'clock in the morning. The house is still dark. The kitchen is still dark. The pilot lights still hiss on the range. The refrigerator still hums. The dishes have dried in the drainer overnight. The dish towel folded over the oven handle is fully dry now. The smell of the kitchen has reset to its morning self. Cool, clean, ready. The wife will be up in half an hour. The day will begin. The percolator will be filled. The bacon will go in the cast iron skillet. The eggs will be cracked into the bowl. The bread will be put in the toaster. The children will come down the stairs in their school clothes, hair combed, faces washed. The husband will come down in his suit, tie not yet knotted, knotting it at the kitchen table while he drinks his coffee. The day will be another day. The hour we have just walked through will repeat itself with small variations that evening, and the evening after that, and the evening after that. For a few more years this is the rhythm. For a few more years the radio plays in the front room, and the mending basket sits beside the chair, and the dish drainer holds the drying dishes, and the children sleep down the hall, and the husband and wife hold hands in the dark before sleep. And then, in 1953, the Zenith console will be delivered, and the rhythm will begin, very slowly, very gently, almost imperceptibly, to change. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us keep making more content. See you in the next one. In the kitchen, in the dark, just before dawn, one last image. The dish towel folded over the oven handle, the percolator empty, ready to be filled, the 2 apples and 3 oranges in the bowl on the dining nook table, the mending basket beside the chair in the front room, empty now, waiting for tomorrow's small repairs, the clock on the mantel ticking, the world held, the morning almost here. Did your grandmother or great-grandmother live through the 1950s American home, the radio era, the slow evenings, the hour before bed when the family sat together in one room? Is there something she made, or something she said, or some small detail of those evenings that you still carry with you? I would genuinely love to hear it in the comments.